one favorite candidate, all right, really blew away that field, 38%. But if that person's getting most of these bullet votes, then the others, the other Greens, aren't getting their share at all. And we have a lopsided, the block voting, when everyone used all three, shut out the minority. Here, the minority, 40%, won two-thirds of the seats. All because of strategy and what will happen here and there in effect, and these are the flaws of at-large voting, among others. Ranked choice voting does it differently. It's still the at-large seats, and I'm sorry, I had more bullet voting examples, sorry. And so the typical ABC voter would have voted for that A. The typical DEF voter, back here, was E, one of the strong candidates among that blue, and others more likely to do with D. And that is what resulted in this backwards result with the bullet voting. Now, there I go. Ranked choice voting. Rank all candidates in order of preference. Our examples are going to still be that green favors green and blue favors blue. Oversimplified because real voters have other ways of doing things, but patterns do emerge. And you right away see order and rationality in the outcome, all right? You want it at large so that the whole city can come together and vote on issues and concerns and connections and perspectives, and it comes 2 to 1 based on the support for the candidates. This time, so we will show ABC preferring ABC. Again, that A is the strongest candidate and is wiping up lots of votes. And they're going to cast their votes for the other because they're going to rank all. In ranked choice voting, you can rank as many or as few as you want. But let's say everyone's here saying, sure, I'll rank them all. It could be a different way. A might be the second. But the point is they're sticking with their major preference group. When we look at the other side, we also see they rank 1, 2, and 3, and they're ranking through. No matter how many permutations I put up here, we're going to have those preferences reflected in 2 seats for this, the majority of voters, the 60% of voters, and 1 seat for the 40%. That's what's different about block voting. That's what's different than strategically doing bullet voting that distort results. This is how the at-large help takes care of that. So we already explained how and I have another minute, only I'll zip through something, how the single districts can, and the single elections and mayor, you can eliminate the preliminary and you can get that majority winner. This is how it works with at-large, to represent fully, because that's the goal of the at-large, is to hear from the city as a whole, not just where you live. Let's take a quick look of how it works. Everyone knows the word majority, and we know that it's over half, but there's a threshold. And we're going to talk about thresholds for the 2 and 3 seats, but look how simple this is. Why do we call it a threshold when it's over half? If one candidate gets over half, and 50% won't do, right? It has to be over 50%. If one candidate has a majority, has over 50%, over half, is there room for another candidate to have the same amount? No. If one has over half, there can't be another one that has over half. That's the meaning of threshold. We use it all the time, but we don't think about it. We have to think about it, but it's very simple when we get to your city council and school committee at-large seats and the various 3-seat at-large. Let's just think about it the same way. If 2 seats up, and you notice we've lowered the threshold to 1/3 so we don't waste any votes on someone who can't use it to be elected, greater than 1/3. If 2 candidates have greater than 1/3, can another candidate have one of those seats? Equal them? No. Mathematically, we're out of options. We're over 2/3. That means no one can have that same amount. We don't waste any votes. You're going to hear this concept of the threshold and for the multi-winner seats, and that's as simple as it is. It's greater. It's as long as you're just over that 1/3, just as if you can be over the 1/2, you're elected, and no one else, more than 2 cannot be elected. For your 3-seat elections, Same exact thing. 3 candidates have just over 1/4. No mathematician in the world can come up with a way for a 4th candidate to have equal. So we've wasted no votes, been spare and Spartan in making sure they're effective and going to the candidate who can most use it to be elected. And that's the concept. In both, each voter is entitled to just a single vote, but by being able to rank their choices, they have the best chance to make it an effective one, and that's true for all ranked choice. The best chance to make that vote work for your preferences. Let's just go right through this. These are based on the 100 people voting in that same proportions you saw. We're going to put the threshold that I just explained for 3 seats, and we're going to raise it to the next whole number, and that's 34. Remember, a little more than 1/3, but we raise it to 34. What do you notice about that strong candidate A? They've got more than they need. And the principle of ranked choice voting, that you don't waste votes that can be used to elect someone, come into play. That's extra. That's surplus. That is what could have resulted in the blue getting 2 seats that one slide we saw, when they really should have only had 1, and green, blue is balanced, green is not. People might have said, I don't want to vote for A, they don't need it. Well, what if everyone thought that, and A, so popular, wasn't even getting elected at all? What are we going to do with that surplus? Look at the second choices, and there's a mathematically precise way to know exactly where they go. You remember in our simplified version, the green is connecting with green and choosing green, and blue's choosing blue. So now, B, after being pretty low because A was so popular, is now doing much better, and we're about to restore balance to that at-large election. Let's see what happens next. Now, the last one, F, is the lowest. Now we're right back in eliminate from the bottom. No surprise, goes to blue. No, it's a tight race, all right? But remember, 60% of the voters favored green. Let's see how this is going to work out. We're going to eliminate the bottom, green, going to put it now. Order is restored again towards that 60-40 balance. But now, D, of the blue candidates, E has, is that say, okay, sorry about that, mistake there. And we're going to drop the first D. Sorry about that. As I said, 30, when the second D, otherwise known as E, reaches the threshold, they are declared elected. As we said, everyone's voting all the candidates, and the last one's elected because of the rounding and these few numbers. That's it. 2 greens have been elected. 1 blue has been elected. You've done your at-large voting. You're not overrepresenting one or underrepresenting another. This is the way the votes work out. This is the companion on the at-large to what you know as the instant runoff voting for the single seat for the mayor to get the 1 person. So we have no preliminary elections. We get this all done, and this is why Northampton, with its current charter, assuming there's no other changes to your single seats, your at-large seats, this is why ranked choice voting is the right thing at the right time for Northampton. And I thank you very much and would welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that presentation. While the committee is reassembling, let me say again that after we see if there are questions for you, we'll have audience participation. Annie, would you hold up the sign-up sheet, please? Thanks. Anybody who hasn't signed up yet, who has decided they want to address us, please come up and add your name to that list, and then we'll take you in the order in which you have signed up. Committee questions? Yes, Bill.
Speaking, I believe, yes, I am the only at-large person here. I have been elected as an at-large counselor, but the cogent point that stuck with me, one of the difficulties that I experienced during campaigning was the novelty of the bullet vote, as you described. And I found it particularly noisome and distracting, and in fact actually spent a good portion of my third campaign promoting the fact that everyone had 2 votes and that they should feel obliged to use it. It was a heavy lift. But I did notice, and as you said, bullet voting can't be completely eliminated in this because you can be entitled to just 1 vote. I mean, you can choose to just use 1 vote for one candidate.
In ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
That's correct. It's a privilege, yes.
Yeah, so
As is the privilege.
it could still play as a strategy for some candidates if they wanted to play that.
No.
Thank you. That's what was my
That I'm
question.
going to disagree with.
Okay.
There is the strategy, because there's logic under the current system that you can hurt your first choice
Right.
by casting that second vote. It is impossible to do that with ranked choice voting. Your later choices cannot hurt because if it's only if you've lost and you're being eliminated, or someone has already kept their first choices, they don't lose them because they're still in contention. No, you cannot hurt. So when I say as many or as few as you want, it's some people, let's use that presidential election, walked into that booth, even if there had been ranked choice voting, right?
Right.
And they said, I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't want those 2, I want this one. So in ranked choice voting, no one makes you rank. But some in the direction of 90% of voters in all ranked choice voters elections choose to rank multiple candidates. Some go deeper, that 7-candidate field. Some went to the 6 or 7. Some did 2 or 3. But it cannot hurt at all. That is the beauty of the system.
I mean, I find that particularly heartening, to be honest. I find that heartening. I think so far you've made a plausible case for more efficacious and more honest voting. So on, yeah. So I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Other questions from the committee? No? Thanks very much for attending. Annie, will you announce the first person on the list and then bring me the sheet?
Liz Popolo.
Liz Popolo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Popolo. I'm a member of Voter Choice Massachusetts, and in studying this issue and looking into a lot of data from around other parts of the country where ranked choice voting is being used, I just wanted to add a few bolstering benefits. So in 21 different states, ranked choice voting is being used in some form or another. That includes a dozen cities that are using it in oftentimes at-large elections and multi-winner scenarios. And in all these, tens and dozens and hundreds of use cases, the data shows that voters overwhelmingly prefer to use ranked choice voting once they've had the opportunity to become acquainted with it, and they find it easy and intuitive to use it. It's really similar to the way we cognitively look at differences between options. Most people look at at a range of options, not as a binary choice, but as a series of, well, if I can't have this one, I'd rather have that one over the other, right? It's a very natural, intuitive thing for voters to do. And even using it for the first time on a ballot with multiple choices, most voters, the vast majority of voters, have no problem and make no errors. And there's a lot of data, especially from up in Maine, where it was recently implemented in 2018, and voters, the League of Women Voters of Maine actually did a lot of studies that you can look to for seeing the way that that voters preferred to have this option of ranking, and to see how many voters actually did go through and use the rankings. As Howie mentioned, I think over 87% of voters actually did use the rankings. So from other cities where it's being used in other states, we've gotten best practices for how to do good voter education, how to do native language translation for non-English speaking voters, and We've also seen a lot of data coming in from how voter turnout is boosted in certain cases 10% or higher, including cities like Santa Fe, that we're seeing a long, slow decline in voter turnout after RCV is implemented, suddenly a boost back up. So I think that's no coincidence. Voters having the option to use their preferences get more excited. They see more candidates that they like and they want to come out for. And candidates aren't afraid to run anymore, so there are more options that attracts more voters from different bases. So kind of a virtuous cycle, if you would, of encouraging more voices and more choices. Thanks.
Thank you. Annie, who's next?
Rachel Naismith.
Rachel? You can pass that down to me, Annie, if you'd like.
Hi. It's a little tall for me.
It should pick you up. There you go.
I'm Rachel Naismith from Florence. I'm a member of Indivisible Northampton, and I've been really taken by the idea of ranked choice voting. So I've been volunteering, making some calls for Voter Choice Massachusetts. And I think that ranking candidates really ensures that as many voters as possible vote for candidates that they really want to win. It's working very well in Maine and other communities, as has been said. I think it really helps voters who are torn between two different candidates, as I have been in several elections. And it allows you to vote with your heart, and instead of spending your time strategizing and trying to figure out, well, cognitively, which would ensure this or that, you can vote with your heart because you know that you can rank your choices. I think this removes some of the cynicism in politics, and these days I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Foster.
Hi, I'm Karen Foster. I am in Northampton. First, I wanted to thank you all for taking this opportunity to hear from all of us. The presentations were so informative and so helpful. And going through the charter, I have a lot more to say than I could say in 3 minutes, but one thing that I think is so important about each of these, whether we're talking about expanding voting to early voting, mail-in voting, reducing the voting age to 16, ranked choice voting, all of that has this opportunity to bring more people into the process. I spend large amounts of my time with people who are in kind of marginalized populations and people who feel fairly disenfranchised. And it really hurts my heart when I hear people say, oh, the government, like the government is these people over here, but it's actually, it's us. And I think anything we can do to bring more people into the process and to hear more voices is important. And I think with a charter review, something, it can feel like kind of small potatoes. Northampton is one town, but I think it's a real opportunity to make a progressive and bold choice as we're looking at all of these topics and thinking about expanding voting. I think you all have an opportunity really to take a departure from what's always been done to really look at what might actually be best for Northampton. And if the sky doesn't fall in Northampton as changes are made, maybe that will have a ripple effect to other communities, both in Massachusetts and then larger. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Doreen Weinberger.
Hi, Doreen Weinberger from Florence. I want to say that I'm a very, very strong supporter of ranked choice voting, and what little free time I've had in the last few years has gone to working as hard as I can to try to get that implemented here in Massachusetts. So I'm obviously a very strong supporter, and I really can't add much to the excellent presentation that you heard, as well as the comments from previous speakers. But I hope you will consider what they all had to say very strongly. And I'll just add that I believe in the last election, the ballot initiative that was in place for a number of communities, including Northampton, ranked choice voting, I believe, got over 70% in virtually every municipality that it was on the ballot. So I just wanted to remind you of that as well. So I believe there really is a lot of strong support out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen Armstrong.
I'm Helen Armstrong, age 82, and I live at the Lathrop, and I came in second in the spelling bee 2 years ago. But I just want to say that I'm very impressed with our youngsters, that they made a very cogent set of arguments for voting at 16. And we have to think about what they're facing into in this century. All of them were born in the 21st century. And the climate crisis is going to land on their generation especially hard. So they deserve to be listened to when the Sunrise Movement, especially, which is led by teens, is so articulate and aware of what's at stake for them. And I won't be here very long myself, but I want to support youngsters to have a voice that I'm probably not going to have many more years. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Now, this is an opportunity, if there's anyone else in the audience who hasn't spoken, who wishes to speak, raise your hand, and yes.
Hi, good evening, and thank you. I'm Claire Hutlinger from Florence, Ward 6. I have spoken to you all before, and I don't have a lot to add to the experts about ranked choice voting, so I wasn't going to come up, but I did think of one thing I do have to add, and that's for the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've been working with voter choice, standing at farmers markets and parades and talking to people about it. And for the most part, people aren't informed about it. It's just not something we think about between elections. Healthcare is really up. Everyone knows about it. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got a friend or family member who needs it. But with voter choice, it's a little different. People just don't know about this. When they hear about it, overwhelmingly, people are really all for it. They you know, you see the look of relief in people's face when that's an option, you know. And so I think that since we have come this far with this, this is an opportunity to sort of be ahead of this wave that really I think is going to be good for the whole country. If we just get our local people informed about it and used to it, I think we'd do a lot for everybody else as well. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Jack Jelt. I share the community of Lathrop with this wonderful lady. I'm a relative newcomer to Northampton, 3 years, spent most of my life abroad working in Africa. I think you shouldn't lose moments like this evening, the eloquence of everyone who's spoken, and the fervor. And I think you need to continue to plow new ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name's Harriet Charland. I live on Ryan Road in Florence. A couple of things. One, please listen to the students. They are absolutely right, and they are wonderful, and so much smarter than we may think that they are. As to ranked choice voting, I know there's a lot of business that goes with it, but in the end, the person who was going to win wins. You know, I think they would win with or without ranked choice voting. It didn't change a vote. It just gave it a different quality. But it didn't make a difference in the vote because the people who got the most votes won. So, I don't know. It's something to think about.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I just speak from here?
No. Is that Claudia? Is that Claudia Lefko? No, Claudia, for TV purposes, you need to be at the podium. Claudia, you're used to the limelight.
Well, I just have a question, really. I mean, I think one of the issues in Northampton is not that we need rank choice voting or not, but we really lack candidates. It's not like we have so many candidates that they're all vying for positions, but so many times we have people, you know, we have openings for a seat and the person who occupies the seat is running again and there's even no contest. So I'm here to raise the question with the committee about term limits, really, because I feel like term, you know, and I'm sorry, Mary Ann. I mean, I know. I love you, Mary Ann. But after a while, I feel like people who get into office, and I know Bill's been in office a long while as well, and I mean, this is not that easy to talk about in front of people who are good public servants for many, many years, but the truth is, I feel like after a while, it really does hinder people from jumping into the race. And we hear from these 16-year-olds, I mean, I guess if you can vote, it means what? Can you run for city council or school committee? I don't know what that means, but the truth is we really need to energize people to run for office. And I feel like it's discouraging if there are people who they say, oh, they've been there, you know, a long time, they're doing a good job. We need the turnover of ideas, no matter how great the people are who are in office. I feel like other people also need to step up and take their chance to do something, and it's very hard to challenge somebody. I mean, truth is, they know a lot, you know, but other people also have ideas and stuff. So I don't know, is this something that the Charter Commission, I spoke when the charter was being, you know, reconsidered about this, and I know it didn't pass. People didn't want term limits, but I'm here to just raise the issue again in terms of this whole conversation tonight about rank choice voting. So thanks.
Thank you.
And apologies.
Yes.
I'm Diana Riddle from Florence, and I just wanted to support ranked choice voting. I don't have anything more to add, except that I do think it does impact the outcome of elections. I think that if you have a first choice and a second choice, and the first choice gets the second choice's, the first choice doesn't have the majority, and the second choice's votes go toward that, then it will change the outcomes of elections. So I think there's a difference in that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm Bridget Glacken, and I'm on House Street in Florence, and I apologize I came late. I've given a presentation on ranked choice and on independent redistricting as part of an educational activity, so I've missed the debate. I'm in favor of ranked choice, but I sort of second Claudia. I don't know how relevant it is this year or next year to our issues of being more democratic in the city of Northampton. And I urge you, I have two children who are living, one lives in Oregon, where they have very high voter participation, they vote by mail. You know, I talked to my daughter about voting in October, and she said our vote is out. 80% of our vote is out. So we've passed that in the state, the voter registration. And I'd urge you to, and one of my other children lives in California. They have ranked choice. They also have top 2 primary. They have independent redistricting. And I urge you, as long as you're opening yourself, I mean, I'm glad that there's a group of people who have organized around ranked choice, and I think that's a lot to think about. But I think there are other ideas and other states that are using them that are really empowering people. I'm very active in the League of Women Voters, and we don't find that people are not registered. For instance, you may think we're all registered, but in Springfield they're not. That's not true. 90% of people are registered in Springfield, 90%. But their turnouts are low. Some of ours are really low, too. And so there's research about that. People don't feel there's anyone to vote for, or they don't feel their vote counts. So since you're opening up this about, you know, improving democracy, I think you should look at some of these other models, top 2 primary, independent redistricting. Actually, the districting of Northampton and the way the wards are has been controversial in the past. Supposedly, you know, creates somewhat, some people think the ward representation isn't ideal. So as long as you're taking this on, I recommend you look at some of these other ideas, and there's certainly a lot of examples where they've come forward in other states. I mean, California's done ranked choice for a number of years now, and they've done top 2 primary. It's easy to find. I think all the positive points are positive, but there's easy to find critiques of unintended consequences. So I'm sure you will all do that, but I encourage you to look at that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, Patty had a question.
Question for the presenters. I have a quick question, and that is, those of you who have studied ranked choice in Maine and other communities, I'm curious about what kind of investment there was in the re-education of voters about ranked choice once the decision was made. How did that happen in Maine? And you can answer.
Maine had a thorough public education campaign despite some ups and downs and court challenges, and the law was passed and they had to do another initiative petition. So it had a lot going on. But the League of Women Voters actually, in partnership with the state, stepped forward and did a massive public education, in proportion to the state. And people went in, they understood what their needs were, and when it gets passed in cities and that state, public education has always been part of that. When we advocate for ranked choice voting for statewide, we write in and assume that there needs to be a public education allocation. And League of Women Voters just played an extraordinary role in Maine and was strongly recognized for this. And then the Secretary of State was anxious, reluctant, all sorts of things going on. And then he said it worked like a dream. Came in a tenth of the budget they anticipated, and people understood it, and they were just pleased, and that voters understood. So he ended up being a big booster and saying he didn't have the time to do the fullest public education campaign because of the ups and downs that the whole initiative went, but he was committed to it, and then extremely pleased with the results. And so I can't think of an adoption over that last 20 years when it's sort of been growing in the cities that didn't include a formal public education campaign. But in the end, it's easy as 1, 2, 3, and so it's not that hard to do that public education campaign. You just got to have the full reach of it.
Yeah. Liz, did you want to, is it Liz? Yeah, you actually mentioned the studies that you looked at.
Yeah, Howie touched on it. They did have a reluctant but quickly converted to very supportive Secretary of State. And I wanted to mention that we also do here in Massachusetts. Our Secretary of State has come out supportive of ranked choice voting. He's tweeted his support. He said it's something we need to adopt here. And so that alone is a big boost to the kinds of the kinds of resources that can now be allocated to adoption in cities and across the whole state potentially. The other thing I wanted to add is that we, in our own voter education, as we're talking about this concept to a lot of people who are new to it, is we actually use in practice example demonstrations where we will invite people to come sample, 4 different types of pie from the pie bar, or we'll have a beer election, or we'll have a rank your favorite donut. We use a sample ballot, and we simply allow people to compare the options and then use a practical example to do that voter education, and we found it extremely powerful. People really love it. For one thing, it's very tasty, and the other is they come away saying, that was not as hard as I thought it would be. So, because you eat the candidates, right?
Howard, you mentioned that you didn't foresee any technology issues. I went to East Hampton when when the Charter Review Commission of East Hampton voted to support it, but it was noted at the time that there were going to be some technology software costs for East Hampton, and it's my understanding that we use the same software that they do. So what makes you think that it's not going to be any additional expenditure for us?
I did mention software upgrade, but the complete, Dominion, yes? Is the ImageCast precinct being used in Northampton? Yes. All right. No, there is a software upgrade package. I did mention that, but what Dominion offers is a complete RCV suite. The ballots, the tabulation, the scanning, obviously, and then the results reporting is all streamlined and continuous and integrated. So there is a software upgrade for your current Dominion.
That's what I thought I heard. Thank you.
The cost of the, may I?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Can you speak to any perceived unintended consequences of RCV that if someone were here who had a different opinion might bring up? I'm just curious.
Well, we often get asked about the arguments against, and what we can often sum it up as institutional inertia. It's just the way things are done. And when you're looking back at 230 years of the way we've done it, there were no other models. There was no ranked choice voting. So the issue of can it be gamed? And the mathematical answer is no. And so that's not it. Some people say, whoever wins the most votes, as we've always done it, which is, but that just doesn't resist the urge to just do it better. And so there's not anything that is, it sounds pretty naive, or to say there's nothing we can identify or have heard other than we just have done it other ways, and that's the difference. So even you put in preliminary elections to fix that other problem, and we saw that even that doesn't go far enough. Who would have thought? When you look at the large field, that the third place finisher, is compromised. And so, if you can always do it better, ranked choice voting moves it forward like that, and it would. There was talk about uncompetitive elections in Northampton, as many places. RCV would bring out more people, okay? But instead of being a problem, that would be the good thing, all right? It can handle the large fields. It can handle this. It can handle 3 people for mayor. It can handle 15. I will tell you, Portland, Maine adopted ranked choice voting. Their first election for mayor was 2011, and there were 15 candidates. It was an open seat, and there were 15 candidates. Everyone thought, oh, I can get there. Ranked choice voting, I'll get the votes. Only one person could get that majority. The next 4 years later, there were 3. But no, people stepping up and running and making competitive elections because there's no risk of vote splitting, no risk of strategizing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, more voices and more choices.
Has there ever been talk of a cap?
Cap on number of candidates?
Mm-hmm.
No, because there shouldn't be, is my opinion. Betsy Hodges, who I didn't play that short video, I had her quote off the mayor. That was, I believe, 35-person race or something like that. Most of those were not contenders, and I'm not slighting anything by saying that. The 35 is just a huge field. There's no cap, because the ones who get the 0.5% or the 100 votes or something, that will happen, and then the system moves on, and you'll have, out of a massive field, you'll have the 7 or 8 trying to jockey with, and the choices will boost only one of them. So I would have to say no to a cap. Dominion, I should also add, there's been a lot of analysis on how many rankings actually go into electing people. In Cambridge, which has 9-seat council, 95% see one of their first 3 candidate preferences, one of their first 3 choices elected. You see, when you look at the number of rankings, you see it goes up from very few with 1, couple with 2. 3 is a spike, all right? People sort of get that. And then there's another spike for 9, because that's the number. But some people go really deep in the rankings, but it just generally doesn't make a difference. It doesn't get there. The Dominion package has a default. The RCV package with that software upgrade has a default of 10 rankings, a limit. In Voter Choice Massachusetts, we would say that's extremely reasonable. It's not going to, if there's 15 people, ranking 11, 12, 13 is just not going to make a difference in the election in practical terms. Mm-hmm. So that's a limit we could live with as a practical attached to your Dominion equipment.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes.
Hi, I'm Andy Anderson, also with Voter Choice Massachusetts. Just wanted to add a few things to your question. There are, one of the arguments is voter fatigue in some sense, that there's too many candidates, you can't look through all of them. And the important point, I would think, is that you do know a group of candidates who you're interested in typically, and you can rank them. And your vote is generally going to go help to coalesce them into a number of electable candidates instead of splitting the votes. So even if you don't rank all the way down through the list, you're still benefiting from having ranked choice voting in place. I guess the other thing is one way you did want to limit the number of candidates, you could require more petitions, signatures to be turned in. I don't know if you want to do that because you have to see how it works in a particular situation, but that is an option. New Hampshire is famously for its presidential primary. There is no signature gathering requirement. You just pay $1,000 and you can get on the ballot, and they have like 30 candidates, running in the primaries. So that is something that could be make the potential candidates, really show that they have some support. The other argument that I've heard that most of the arguments stem from not quite understanding how ranked choice voting works, so I won't worry about that. But one other argument is that some people will say, well, ranked choice voting requires a candidate both have core support and broad support. So they have to have enough core support that they're getting first choice votes, and then they can coalesce to get a majority and get that broad support. And they say, some people will say, well, that means that everyone's second choice can't win, right? And that's true, because if they're the second choice of everyone, they're going to have no first choice, and they'll be the first person eliminated. So it's a balance. We do want candidates that are going to, get a little fire behind them from the electorate right off the bat. That's still an important part of our electoral system. So I think that's an important feature that we do expect to see, good first choice percentage before you can win.
Other questions from the committee? No? Let me conclude by thanking everyone who came tonight and participated and listened. So I want to thank people watching at home and say that our work continues. We have 8 more months ahead of us to review the charter, and we're reviewing all of the charter, not just the issues surrounding elections. We meet regularly the first and third Tuesday of each month at 6:30, second floor hearing room at City Hall. We welcome public comment at those meetings, so anyone who wants to come and address us on anything related to the municipal charter is welcome to do so. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It being 4 o'clock on April 1st, 2019, I call to order the Committee on City Services and the Northampton City Council. And would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Councilor Carney.
Present.
Councilor Labarge.
Present.
Councilor Bidwell.
Here.
And Councilor Nash.
Here. Thank you. And I'll note that this proceeding is being audio and video recorded. Seeing no public comment, we have today with us an update on the building department activity, permit volume, and I'll ask please to join us, if you would, at the table, Lou, if that's okay? Sure. Easier for the camera. Yes. And Lou Hasbrook, who is the building commissioner of the City of Northampton. Thank you.
Hi, Maggie. Welcome.
I'll turn over to you if you'd like to.
Okay, so I thought this was mostly about short-term rentals. Right. And I did a sheet up about what I know about short-term rentals. And it's confusing, and probably the most confusing aspect of it is that there's any number of terms and definitions of what I think is generally getting referred to as short-term rentals. Some are more specific than others. Sometimes, the numbers of allowable rental rooms varies, it seems, between 3 and 5 and 6 and beyond. 6 or more, it switches to another level if you're talking about certain codes. And I think until we sit down, until the city sits down and figures out and decides, I think what they're going to regulate under this new statute, then we can figure. Then the city can decide what regulations they want to bring to bear on it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Louis, I know, like off on Ryan Road, about a year and a half ago, we had an accessory apartment made for one of my residents for his mom and dad. Mm-hmm. The father has died, so say, as an example, the mother passes away. Mm-hmm. Can they go ahead and use that as a rental?
Well, with something like that, if it was done as an accessory apartment, the owner of the property has to live in one or the other of the units.
Okay, so say I'm the owner, mm-hmm. and whatever, my parents have passed away. As long as I live there, I could rent that?
Yes, and the regulations my piece of the regulations don't speak at all to a dwelling unit like that. If it's a single dwelling unit, whether it's a standalone single-family house or an apartment, that's not, the building code regulations don't address that at all. I don't think the fire code regulations do. The short-term rental, the regulations that seem to relate to what we call short-term rentals are bed and breakfasts, renting a room in the house. one of the big factors is whether the occupancy is permanent or transient, and actually it's transient or non-transient. You can rent a room in your house to somebody for a period longer than 30 days, and it's no different from your child, your son, or your daughter living in a room. I think that what most of the regulations focus on is short-term rentals. Other towns put a lot of, other towns speak directly to single-family homes, vacation homes. When you get down near the shore, some towns have real specific regulations about somebody who rents their house out for a week at a time when they don't live there. Building code doesn't address that at all. I don't think fire code does either.
I'm talking with a resident in Ward 7. She told me that she was for what we were going to be doing, hopefully, with short-term rentals. And on her street, and she's a retired police officer, there is a house. And she said, sometimes people are there for a small period of time, and the house is never kept up, the lawns are never kept up, and she was really hoping that there would be significant changes with the short-term rentals. So how do we handle something like that if the people are not here that own it, they live in another state, but they're doing short-term, but then they're renting longer, and then they go back to short-term, and they're not taking care of their properties?
Well, I think the short-term rental, the aspect of short-term rentals that is going to get addressed by because of the latest statute is going to be a general ordinance and not a zoning ordinance. I don't think zoning is going to get involved in the financial part of it. How zoning does address it, I don't know. That I think remains to be seen. Right now, zoning requires that a bed and breakfast, and Northampton defines bed and breakfast as a maximum of 3 rooms, and they require a special permit from
3 or fewer rooms.
3 or fewer rooms.
Breakfast included, reserved in advance. Right. But then you can have 4 or more rooms are let, and that would be the bed and breakfast establishment?
Everybody has their own little bite of this apple. The licensing statute, the excise tax statute, the fire statute, the fire code, and the building code, and then the zoning ordinance, and each has a different number of, and the health code too. Each has chosen a different number of rooms and a different name to call it too. Rooming house, lodging house, bed and breakfast.
So, I just had a question.
Please, yeah.
So is there, I've gotten the impression that at some point there's going to be some effort between your department, fire, and public health to try and come at it from a lot of different ways and see if there was one city approach that would emerge as to regulation of short-term rentals.
I think it's going to start with the financial piece of it, and I think that's what triggered the discussion about it. And the new statute, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty certain that the new statute says that places like Airbnb and other organizations that coordinate these rentals are going to have to tell the municipalities who's registered with them. And what the city does with that remains to be seen. As far as the building code's concerned, a building official can't go into an existing single-family home. Just can't.
I mean, without complaint?
Without
Some other
without
registered complaint?
some reason to believe that there's a life safety issue.
So just a routine inspection could not be conducted?
Not by the building official.
Right.
The fire department has more latitude. What the city could require as part of this registration process is not clear to me yet.
Right.
Some towns have, I put a fair amount of time and energy into looking at what other towns are doing about it, and some towns use their fire department to inspect, but they're primarily focused on smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. If someone were to come to the building department and say, I want to turn my house into a bed and breakfast, we would say, as far as the building code is concerned, you need to put a sprinkler system.
You need to put what?
A sprinkler system in the house. And that came from
For
the
anybody?
most recent code. What?
For anybody that wants to turn their house into
a bed and breakfast.
Or an Airbnb even?
Well, there's no different. Airbnb is just
So any bed and breakfast
the
needs to be
name.
sprinklered?
Any new bed and
That isn't
breakfast.
grandfathered at this point.
Right. But
So if my neighbor, when their daughter heads off to college and decides that they want to rent out that room through Airbnb,
Sprinkler their house.
in theory, since that'd be a new unit, they would be required to sprinkler the house or sprinkler that room? Or?
No, the house.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's pretty clear, but because it's a change of use, because in the building code, they define, let me just find it, owner-occupied lodging houses with 5 or fewer guest rooms. A lodging house is one family dwelling, one or more occupants are primarily permanent in nature, which rent is paid for guest rooms, and they define guest rooms. And it becomes a change of use from a regular single-family home, and that change of use would trigger the requirements to put a sprinkler system in it.
Any change of use or just this?
This change of use with a single-family home would trigger that requirement.
Other changes of uses, just to change, for example,
for
a single family to a 2-family would require a sprinkler.
It would have to go to a 3-family.
Okay, a 3-family.
Is in a different code, so it moves it out of the residential code.
I see, and then you need a sprinkler.
Or sometimes there's a way around it too that they call, and so if you do XY, a 3-family home would need a sprinkler system, but you might be able to avoid putting a sprinkler system in a 3-family home that you created out of a 2-family home if other life safety features were more than they needed to be.
And just to follow up on that, a typical, and I'm talking ballpark, we're talking $100,000 for a 3-family home for a sprinkler system.
No, I think less than that.
70? I mean, but it's expensive. I mean, it's
a big. I don't know.
I just know a couple of different places that needed sprinklers.
You know, 20,000. You could put a sprinkler system in a single-family home when you're building it for about $8,000 now.
Right.
The prices have gone down. But I think that most people are going to just say that, oh, I've been renting rooms for a long time. And that's going to be the way that people address it. I already know that.
Saying this is no change of use. So
I've heard that from other communities.
Yeah.
It's so confusing.
Well, it is confusing.
It is. My
The idea
question
that
is,
there's not a single definition that covers that each aspect of the regulations or statutes that apply should use this. They should have some consistency. but they don't. So we're stuck with that.
So who monitors all this? As far as, her and I could own a house, we live in it, and we have like 4 bedrooms, but we have a dear friend that's coming in to live with us. Does that change right there? I mean, you're not taking rent from an individual. They've come in to stay with you, to live with you.
Well, I think rent is a very specific term. I think if you don't rent to somebody, no. Right.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, so the sticking point is, Louis, you're referring to like bed and breakfast, like Craig Della Penna's place out on the rail trail. They need to meet these types of regulations. But are you saying that if somebody does an Airbnb and rents out 1 bedroom for, that they need to put in a sprinkler system?
Well, that's what the building code says.
Okay.
I mean, it does say that.
So right now, all of these Airbnbs that are currently operating are out of compliance.
Well, no, they're grandfathered. They're grandfathered.
They'll be grandfathered?
There's a grandfathering aspect of it.
Right.
If you built a house and said this is going to be a B&B, you'd have to put a sprinkler system in. If you came and said, I want to make my house into a B&B, you'd have to put a sprinkler system in it.
And that regulation is now in effect.
So, so as of, what's the date that that regulation went into effect?
January 1st, 2018.
2018.
Which is when the current building code became effective.
That's a very important piece of information to have.
But it also isn't altogether clear to me how well it's being enforced.
By whom?
By us. By people that.
But by which
who
responsible
might
party in
enforce
the
it.
city?
Say again?
By which responsible party in the city?
Well, no, I think it more or less statewide.
How statewide?
But still, there has to be a city oversight. Who would be responsible in the city to monitor that? It would be you, okay.
One of the things that's going to happen, one of the things that's coming out of this most recent legislation is that there's going to be, the cities and towns are going to find out how many B&Bs there are in their community. Right. That's the biggest thing. That's going to be the thing that starts, and then how people cope with it going forward is something that remains to be seen. I mean, I think that how if the town or the city finds out that 123 Main Street in some town, Massachusetts, is a B&B, they're going to then have a discussion about. But if it's been a B&B for a while, if it's an existing B&B, just because they're now registering it doesn't mean they have to put a sprinkler system in. What is it going to mean? That's the piece that I think is going to. There's going to be a lot of discussion about it, and because this is going to be, the reports are going to be about places that are already registered. I think there might be the presumption that they've already been B&Bs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be registered with Airbnb or whichever other service they're registered with.
So one of the things that Mr. Della Penna was telling us about the difference between his service and the Airbnb service is that he's providing a lodging experience where they're preparing meals, that they have to have special dining and cleaning and all of this kind of stuff, and that the health inspector comes in and there's all of that. Whereas your typical Airbnb isn't providing, they might say there's coffee on here's a coffee pot, who knows, maybe they make pancakes and all sorts of stuff as an addition, but that, we don't. I think we haven't made that distinction here. Although Mr. Della Penna says that distinction's been made, and all of these other people are doing similar stuff, but they're flying, he called it, I think, flying under the radar or something.
Distinction made by whom? You said the distinction's been made by whom? What is
Well, we've already kind of made the distinction as to here's what a B&B
is.
Well, I think we need to use the term bed and breakfast
So here's what
and
bed
then
and breakfast-
B&B.
Yes.
Because, I mean, most people think of the same thing, but bed and breakfast for us is everything that Mr. Della Penna provides. B&B is more like an Airbnb, which is you rent a room online.
Is that
show up.
consistent, though, with our definitions of the
No, I'm trying to think of it just so we can talk about it.
yeah.
Because I think
Because I think there's many Airbnbs, like you
Yes.
said, that provide the similar services that Craig Della Penna
Right, but they're
provides
not
in terms
meeting
of
the regulations. That was part of what Craig's point
Which
is.
part of the regulate, that was the, so which part?
That to serve food, to serve breakfast in that lodging.
Serve
sort of-
safe certifications and those
all
sorts of things?
and separate
Okay.
silverware and all of that kind
Okay, I
of stuff.
see.
So part of this point is I'm regulated.
I see.
And I'm meeting all of the requirements. And meanwhile, I'm competing against all of these other businesses that aren't meeting these regulations.
Well,
So
I'm not sure that that's not a distinction without a difference, because depending on, I'm not sure where he believes that serving breakfast is any sort of requirement to be classified as a bed and breakfast.
Right.
Because there's one set of criteria, and I'm going to check to see which one it is. General Law 64, Mass General Law Chapter 64G refers to breakfast, but that's only the room excise tax statute. It's not the licensing statute, which is GL 140, which is the one that differentiates between
Yeah, you're referring to the distinction here between bed and breakfast establishment and bed and breakfast home, right, which are defined in Mass Chapter 64G. So it sounds like the Craig Della Penna establishment is a bed and breakfast establishment because 4 or more rooms are let, breakfast included, reserved in advance, and the difference is 3 or fewer, breakfast included, reserved in advance. That's a bed and breakfast home. But both of those are different than many of the already allowed Airbnb establishments that may or may not include breakfast.
Northampton zoning ordinance doesn't
Require breakfast.
speak to breakfast at all. And it's a
I don't
max.
remember that from the.
It's a
Yeah, I
max.
think you just do a text search and not come up with breakfast in the zoning code.
And then Northampton zoning limits a bed and breakfast to three rooms, 6 individuals.
Right.
3 rooms with 2 people apiece. So how does a bed and breakfast, how does a place with 4 rooms to rent fit into the process?
Or a 2-family where the single owner lets out 6 of the rooms. The 3 rooms upstairs and the 3 rooms downstairs. I know people who do that in Boston with a 2-family home, live there still.
Or what about a place where the owner doesn't live and it's rented?
Right.
It'd be simpler to, it'd be nice, just, none of this existing, just start over and create
No, I think
something.
that it's, because there's all these overlapping aspects of the regulation of whatever happens in these houses, the city could, be relatively arbitrary and choose definitions, name them, define them, and then regulate them.
Can we do that Can we do that in overlooking what state regulations already have?
Well, I think the state regulations will then land on top of it. and the degree to which the state regulations land on top of it is
Does the state regulation or the local regulation apply then?
the most restrictive.
The most restrictive, okay, that's what that, okay. So it could then be the local restriction. Council?
Thank you. I know with Greg and also with Dee and John Clapp with the bed and breakfast, a big concern was the language of professional. That bothered them, professional. Dee also, and I've had many talks with her on her bed and breakfast, and she did explain also of the Board of Health coming in on a yearly basis and how she has to separate all her utensils, okay, that they use versus the people that come in to stay at that bed and breakfast. So there was concerns about the language of professional.
Somebody's going to have to define it, because
Is that a local or state?
Well, I think the professional piece is coming out of the most recent statute.
Yeah, and it has a state on it, says professional.
Right. And you could, what is, I don't know, I'm not in a position to make these kind of, like I say, it's just, distinctions essentially without a difference, I think.
Are you suggesting that ultimately we need a city ordinance that clarifies definitions, and that would then determine under which regulations different pieces apply?
That's how I would, I think the place to start is for the city to take all that's out there currently, look at it, put it together, choose something that they can put a box around, and then go from there. I mean, the health regulations come from a set of overlapping regulations, the minimum standards for human habitation, which is one section of the health code, and then serving, the serving provisions, the food service aspects of the health code. And I don't know where the health department is at this point with that.
Would you recommend something like, not officially recommend, but would it make sense to have you and the health director and the planning department, just come together in terms of seeing what would make sense in terms of common definitions?
Well, we already had that meeting, and we came away from it with the idea that we needed to go back to the office and figure out what it is we wanted to bring to the table. But it's got to be, there has to be some reason to work on it, and we're going to have to look at some kind of definitions.
Do you think there's any way that we can help in that effort at all? I mean, we're certainly interested if that helps in terms of passing that along, I'm assuming.
I think it should come from the top down.
Okay.
And then and then it becomes it goes up and downhill, but the idea that what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want to do with this? And then what are we going to do to make this happen? It's,
Well, plus at some point we'll have benefit of this registry coming from the state, and we'll know
what sort of scope,
what's out there. And if there's 63 places that are registered, we go through and kind of take a look at what they are and what are the ones that we care about and which ones not.
And it's big implications too for those folks who thought, they might rent out a room or two, knowing what that requires now in terms of investment with a sprinkler system and all the rest of that.
Well,
That's an important, that really, I think, could just be an 8,000 job, but I just know a couple that have costed 6 figures.
So my thoughts are that in terms of us setting up a way to inventory these businesses, if it best mirrors what we have on record with the city in terms of the properties, because they're listed as, the property A is listed as a single-family home, property B is a two-family home, is that right? And then on top of that, we're applying this Airbnb unit thing, because the way Airbnb is looking at this, these are all units, and they don't care whether it's, the second unit in an apartment building, or whether it's just somebody's extra bedroom. And my guess is that it would be best if we went about it, worked it backwards from our records rather than trying to figure out what Airbnb is going to provide us. Because we're going to, I think in the end, we'll get all of these potential, well, here's all the money that was earned by Airbnb in Northampton, and then we have to sort through, okay, how many of these people are exempt, because then we have to figure out, who has which of these Airbnb rentals is actually in, the original unit structure, or is that
with some effort, who has a special permit for a bed and breakfast, or alternately, who got a special permit for a bed and breakfast over time.
Right.
If people don't have to, if somebody moved and now it's not a B&B, we wouldn't know that. I think we need to see what comes from, through the state, and then apply that, and we can push that back into the information we do have, which is it a single family, a two-family, a three-family.
So we should fly by the seat of our pants at that.
Well, I think we're going to take what we get in terms of information, the 312 listings that come from Airbnb, plus there's, I think, a couple others, services, and plow that back through and see what we come.
Right, you could just easily cross-check those 312 that are in Northampton.
Well, I don't know easily, but...
Well, it might take 312 hours, but...
Well, it'd take, what we'd have to do is, create some kind of...
cross-check it.
Relational data, probably a spreadsheet at the beginning, to cross it over. And then see what we got.
I still have concerns because I did hear one resident speak in regards to renting off some rooms, okay, bedrooms, but making an office out of it. Don't you have to have a permit in order to run a business and run an office?
No, there's the rights, the home businesses and home occupations split into two places, but a home business is allowed by right. Until I honestly can't remember what the things that trigger the requirement for a special permit, but it's pretty clearly spelled out, and it got a lot more. It got more liberal about in 2015. But no, you can have you can have a therapist's office in your house as long as you stay within the constraints of the ordinance without a permit.
My big concern is who is going to monitor, who is bed and breakfast. That's going to be an easy one for me, okay, looking up and so forth like that. But having these rooms and renting them off, somebody can they don't have to apply, they'll just do it. And this is what was said about from Dee Clapp and them, that people are doing it and they're not registered.
Well, people do an awful lot of things without
You're
so much
right.
of it fairly well.
Yeah, I think the history of people renting rooms out of their house is long and long and long. I mean, I know the house I moved into 25 years ago was an older woman who rented out the rooms, the 4 other rooms in the house to 4 old gentlemen, and, you know, I mean, and they come from a long history of rooming houses. I mean, I think there are certainly those that are licensed lodging houses, and then there are those that are maybe under the radar, but people have been renting rooms in their houses for decades.
And that's my concern, how does this monitor? Who watches this?
But as soon as someone stays for the 31st day, it's no longer transient housing. It's no longer short term.
Right. Then it's medium, or
No,
it's not long
they
term,
don't
right?
have. Well,
Even as a roommate?
they had to pick a day. They had to pick a number, and 30 days is the number. And so transient housing, and the difference, say, between a hotel, motel, and an apartment building is sort of established at transient and non-transient occupancy, and transient occupancy is 30 days or less. Non-transient occupancy is some length of time longer.
Does that include the person who is on the lease for an apartment but takes on a roommate? Is that roommate then fall into that category? I mean, so, because we know that happens all the time. So you're renting out, you're on the lease, and you have an extra room, and so you take a roommate. Is that also in the category of does that have to be regulated?
If it's, in theory, it would fall under the lodging house, rooming house, bed and
Unless
breakfast.
they're on the lease.
If it was less than 30 days, and if it's more than 30 days, then it's just another roommate. And,
Oh, okay. I see.
So,
Okay. Now I understand. It's not transient.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's a roommate, and that doesn't put you in any category of renting out a room per se for other reasons.
So during our discussions with the mayor around this topic, there was something about 90 days, that 90 days is enough, that's when it becomes long-term?
Well, it's, some are defined, some aren't defined. The most explicit definition I can find comes out of the building code, and it has to do with transient and non-transient. And it does a lot of, it defines a lot of aspects of the building code. And I think that other, Northampton zoning uses the word transient. The building code uses in the commercial side of it transient and non-transient. In the residential side, it says primarily permanent. And then it also says guests. I think the city's got to sit down and decide what words they're going to use and what criteria they're going to use, and then go from there. And I think that once the city gets from the state the reports that come out of the Airbnb and other booking sites, see what the and we'll figure out what the situation is.
And if we have suggestions, should we send them to you, should send them to the mayor?
I think start with the mayor's office, because that's where
it was kind of for the
start.
Well, presumably down the road, when there is some clarity about all this, to address the concern about
expanding the requirement for inspections, which I know is a big concern. There's only so many personnel there. Could always be the option of asking folks to sign some affidavit, the way we do in other situations.
I don't know if this keel will or not.
This is council multitasking.
Somebody needs the elevator.
Service.
Probably doesn't do that, so that's a newer one.
Let me see if I can help you with this. I have a key to the front door of this, but I don't know if it's open. Is she referring to the back door?
What's going on here?
Oh, I see this.
Where's she going?
She wants to get to the elevator.
Oh, I see, because they lock. I know what door she's referring to. I do not have a key to that door.
Well, anyway.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to just say some nice things. Louis, I want to thank you for, you've been really helpful in a lot of stuff that's come up in my ward. Lots of questions about stuff on property and property lines, and you've been really helpful, and you've been really great with when I pointed constituents your way, so thank you.
Well, I like working in Northampton, and this is part of it is that I think it works. We work pretty well. There's a supportive aspect of it that I haven't seen in other towns. So.
And Tony, I also have worked with Tony Patillo for many, many years, and you also in the office. And I want to thank you for everything that you have done in the city, and especially Ward 6. It's becoming busy again, and I thank you for helping me, guiding me, because it has not been easy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. The report, I didn't bring a handout report on building permits, but and we keep track on a fiscal year basis. So we're 3/4 of the way through FY19. We're on track for building permits took a big jump in FY15, and they've stayed consistently higher than they've been in the past, both raw numbers and then value of permits. We do see the value go up because of inflation, but just the numbers of permits that we're doing, and there have been, aside from Smith College, which the permits numbers go up and down depending on, I guess, what their endowment is doing. Consistently across, we'll probably have another, aside from the apartments, we'll probably have another 40 new single-family houses, which is something that just new single families took a drop in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, and they've come back up. Village Hill was nearly built out, and now there's 30 more in one subset of the development that had 85 in it. I think one of the things that I was most excited about is the new commercial building at Village Hill. It'd be nice to get more commercial up there. There's a mixed use.
We got her into the elevator, so sorry for the delay. Not with that key, though.
I didn't think so. There's another mixed-use building in the works. There's two significant solar arrays, one on Park Hill Road and one in Willard's Gravel Pit.
We have 3 in Ward 6.
Right. One of the people, the people doing one of those called me up and said, we're doing a small array, and I'm thinking, 50 panels, and he said 5 megawatts, which is I think 15,000 panels.
Oh yes.
But he's from Kansas, and they have square miles of arrays out there. So I think both of the new arrays are going to have some battery storage associated with them, which is, and I'd be interested to see battery storage is now for the pads and these things, these battery packs come, you know, and drop and, you know, plug and play. They just plunk them down, bolt them down, and then connect them. And one of them, which is, you know, something which is not insignificant. Lots and lots and lots of I don't have the number, but you know, residential roof mount solar is 4 or 5 permits a week probably. So it's, even though some of the rebates have fallen off, it's still very popular.
Could we talk about the solar on the roofs and so forth like that? If you don't want them on your roof, but you'd like them on the ground?
Yeah, you could still, there's not much difference between there's an upper limit of what you can put on the ground without coming in for special permits, but usually what you can put on the ground is usually more than you can fit on the roof unless you've got a really large house. So, and we don't see the ground mount is predicated, the upper limit is predicated on what your on-site consumption is. If you had a heated driveway and heated swimming pool and a giant house, you could have a larger ground mount solar array than if you had a small house. But still can get even at the lower end, you can get a ground mount solar array that is larger than will fit on most roofs and will, you know, support, you know, provide 100% of the electricity of the house.
Because I'm looking at going ground.
It's not much different than a shed, and there's actually a little bit of a loophole in the sense that if you built a shed and then put like a big wood shed and then put solar on the roof, it could be bigger than than a ground mount array could be. But only one time did I ever run into that.
I thought of that loophole.
I know. So what if you already have a shed? What if you already have a shed that's built?
You can put solar on that for sure, as long as it's sturdy enough.
You're just saying that it's the same dimensions as
Yeah,
would be a
right.
shed, so you can put one next to it. Are there any other questions folks have?
No, just good luck in sorting this through. This is done a very good job of reminding us just how complicated it is and how many contradictory definitions there are. And there's a lot of sorting.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some, you know, I don't know, arbitrary, but going to have to choose some criteria, real specific criteria. And I mean, one of the things that's really important to me is to have a regulation be very specific, unambiguous, clearly defined, because that's what makes something enforceable.
And use an example, like what?
For example, you shall only have 3 rooms in the house with so many, you know, is that the kind of thing?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, pick how many rooms and does breakfast actually, you know,
what constitutes serving a meal and
what constitutes breakfast. And I mean, to know that that those little wrapped packages of 6 small donuts don't count as a meal.
They have to come
But
from,
if they
they
have
have to come
chocolate
from, they have to come from what's it's over here.
But
Put the donut plate, glazed.
I think those are
Only
the kinds of
glazed
questions
donuts
that-
qualify.
Those are the kind of things that are going on. Because it really is interesting how as soon as there's some kind of regulation, there'll be somebody out there that wants to push it. And that, recently a zoning ordinance changed to, and I think you voted on it in February, that bathing facilities in an accessory building are not allowed, because you start out with a toilet, and then pretty soon it's a toilet with a wash
And then
up
it's a hot
sink,
tub.
and then it's got a shower, and and then.
But we let an eye wash. We're allowing you to wash your eyes.
How do you know this? Who monitors?
Well, we do. I mean, that's, you have to get a permit.
But what if they don't?
Well, then.
Then it's complaint based, and if a neighbor goes like this and looks and sees you going naked.
It's just like working on with cars, right?
Everything's complaint based. It's not blue, my right, it's really about whether a neighbor or somebody else files a complaint.
Right, it would be like working on vehicles on your property, putting them on your lawn and selling them, correct?
But somebody has
And
to
the
complain.
complaints start.
Somebody has to complain, it's not Lou's job to go over patrol.
Nobody said
If
that.
we drive by and see a
But that's what I mean. It's like somebody has to do it.
things in the yard, somebody obviously doing work, will stop and look at it. That's a piece that's pretty simple. I mean, there are roofers that won't take a roofing permit unless they think that they're on a street that people will drive by. I mean, I think that's because if you do a lot of work, the cost of the $40 per job for a roofing permit adds up. And sometimes we see them and, stop, don't see the permit card in the window, call the office and ask if there is one, or sometimes the neighbors will complain. So, but renovating your, the upstairs of your garage into a living space is usually pretty obvious.
And you can do that, with permits.
Well, not without a permit, you can't do anything
I just
without.
said that.
And what they've done is, no, you can't make your garage into an apartment without it meeting the criteria for an apartment. And
Or an office, right?
office is different from an apartment. You can do office work with a building permit, but it's allowed by right. But a whole nother apartment isn't.
I gotcha.
And so what makes an apartment? Well, kitchen facilities and bathing
Bathrooms
facilities.
and all
And so when they changed the ordinance to prohibit bathing facilities as opposed to a toilet, it made things easier for me.
Somebody isn't using that eye wash to cover their whole body.
Okay. Ready? Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Good luck with all this.
I think hopefully what I communicated is that it's very complicated.
Yes. Make sure to compliment.
Thank you.
Okay, so we want to know, I have to make a quick call. My garage closes at 5 o'clock, and I just might need to check and make sure my car's ready. But in the meantime, we have the minutes, so if you want to just take the minutes, I'll just check on those, and then we can go with one of those, I'll be there. Just make sure I can pick up my car.
Okay, I'd like a motion for approval of the minutes.
Move approval minutes for March 4th. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will move down to item 5, which was referred to our committee or various committees. Disability Commission. I have met Jeremy, great guy, and I know Jim, you know him very well. And him and I had a lengthy talk on the phone, and he did come to one of our city Commission on Disability meetings. Very, very, very thorough, very helpful. So when we talked, he gave me exactly how he feels. He said that he is hoping that we consider him for the position on the Disability Commission. For 41 years ago, he was born with a permanent disability, which is called osteogenesis imperfecta, that left him wheelchair-bound with fragile bones. Throughout his life, he's been in a wheelchair. He's observed how society is built around the needs of the able-bodied and often looks the needs of the disabled. As he's grown up, he has increasingly realized that the only way to make positive changes is to stop being a mere observer and actually going out there and getting involved. He says, I've been waiting to play a more active role in improving the lives of disabled people in our community, and I believe I am a unique position to do so, and I agree with that. In addition to graduating from college with a degree in communications, he's also been deeply involved in music for the past 20 years. He finally decided to speak out about snow removal issues in Northampton, for example, through word of mouth and social media. He was able to reach a wide audience and get an article written about it in the Gazette. He believes that if he is appointed to the commission, he will be able to continue to use his voice and his local connections to speak to the community about the issues we are dealing with, to gain awareness and support from as many people as possible for all the great work that the Disability Commission already does. He already believes that to have more support from the community and more people aware and encouraging of the Commission's work would lift some burden off the shoulders of the Commission and help us get even more accomplished. I have lived in Northampton for 15 years. I have been riding my electric wheelchair all over town and experienced firsthand the accessibility issues at local businesses, the problem with snow removal in winter, and I would like to do everything I can to make a long-lasting improvements so that one day people will see Northampton as a community that is more aware of its disabled citizens' needs and is determined to help them meet those needs. So I would like to make a motion for a positive recommendation to City Council.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, moved and seconded to send the name Jeremy Dubs to fill a vacancy on the Disability Commission to the full City Council with a positive recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I hear no opposed or abstentions. That passes. Thank you. And Councilor Bidlack?
Yes, I spoke last week with Ben Capistrand, I think is how he pronounces it. He has been in Northampton for several years. He's on the Smith faculty. His fields of research and investigation and writing are very much in the areas of gerontology and demographics as they affect different aging issues. And I think what he is very much interested in doing is, at some level, seeing what the intersection is between his academic work and the real work of the Council on Aging. And I think that input is very much desired by the director and by the council. So I think it sounds like a good fit. So he looks forward to joining the Council on Aging. So I would put forward a motion, a positive recommendation for Ben Capistrand for Council on Aging.
Okay, moved and seconded to send the name Ben Capistrand with a positive recommendation to the Council on Aging to the full City Council with a positive recommendation. All in favor? Aye. Aye. And I think that's unanimous. And may I just say that both of these, I think, are excellent appointments. And lately I've been pretty excited about the caliber of appointments we get to all these committees. And just remind folks, I'm not sure if it went to everyone, Laura, but that little conversation between court and...
Right, about the annual appointments. I thought I sent it to all.
Did you folks?
Oh,
So it's
yeah, yes, I
basically
did
he's
see
saying
that.
that there may be 53 appointments that could come to us.
There weren't that many last year.
Right, but there may be, well, it was good thinking that we had to think in advance because with the possibility of 53 that might come to us before the end of June.
That's how many are expiring, June 30th, 2000.
June 30th, yeah. Maybe
How
they'll-
many?
53.
Yeah, counted.
Well, that's like I said, so if we look at that, that's like 12 apiece, 13 apiece,
Yeah, yeah.
which isn't too bad if you think
If we
about it.
spread it out over a
You know,
few
right,
months,
right.
we're doing
If they-
3-4
The sooner
months.
they can get us those names, I mean, that's one thing we could do. If we could get all those names in advance, we could know, and over the next April, May, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, if we knew we had 13 people, if we had a list in advance about what those were, it would help us to plan ahead so that even if we end up having to take up all 53 at the same meeting, we will have had time to... Well, that's what I'm saying. It might not, I mean, that's going to be a 2-hour meeting if they're 2 minutes discussion per person, whatever. I mean, it's doable.
Right.
But
I think what he said was that sometime after the budget process is concluded, that's when the mayor's office begins the process of reaching out to these people
I
to
see.
see if they're interested in.
Okay, so we're not going to see anything before.
So you would get a list, but you wouldn't know if all of those people are interested in reappointment.
Okay, but what we could at least do with that list, right, is we know that in 99%, cases, people are recommended by the mayor's office for reappointment. And in probably 85% of those, people are going to still serve. So it would just give us, I mean, the sooner they could at least get us the list of those expiring, we'd have just an easier, because otherwise we're going to be left with having to make 53 calls or, and 50, even if it's 15 calls a piece, it's following up on all those in a matter of 2-3 weeks or something could be challenging.
You could definitely ask court for that list.
Yeah.
Whether it won't be definitive until later.
Right, knowing that, we could at least know which...
Maybe give you a time frame too, like when he thinks they're going to begin contacting them or...
Right, and we can identify people we already know on the list and, be easy call, those sorts of things.
So the only glitch in that, I think it's a great idea, is that the mayor's office may have names on that list that maybe they want people to expire and they have other candidates in mind. And
Well, that's why we can't call them yet until they, but if it's clear to us that there's some of those that, I mean, it's true that there may be people that are, that they know that they won't reappoint.
Right.
It would be helpful if they know that now, they could kind of let us know to stay away from,
That would be a good email to send out now. Do you want to be reappointed?
But it's also in the mayor's prerogative to appoint or reappoint too. So there may be something in their office that
And reappointments are easier than
replace or
Well, in
whatever.
theory, the communication should be between the mayor and the committee or board chair.
Right.
It's not so much asking an individual member, do you want to be reappointed? It's asking the chair of the committee.
But they still need to ask the individual as well.
True, but
maybe
the first call should be the board chair.
Well, I mean, there could
Because
be...
every once in a while says, this guy hasn't been showing up, I don't want him reappointed.
Right, there could be, apparently that's done with every reappointment. What I've been told is that the mayor's office does check, but maybe that's, not been a consistent practice. At any rate, we're looking at what we're facing, which is the 53 by the end of June. We could add a layer by requiring another call to the, we could make those calls. We could make all those calls to the, because I don't think we're going to get that level of assurance from, we might, but it's going to be a lot, and we're talking about probably the May meeting and the June meeting, and I would think the July meeting, because they won't have gotten them all together. And usually our July meeting, we end up having to, it's right around 4th, it's the first Monday. So.
I don't think you probably had to process out much.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible we could meet, 5 meetings in a row in June, 5 days or whatever. I mean, we can always add more meetings if we need to. It's harder for me. I'm actually...
really get this done before June 30th.
I agree.
Because then then contacting people throughout the summer becomes more difficult.
I do.
So I think that if, our push is to meet and get our recommendations done, even if they wait till that next council meeting, that first council meeting in July, that might even be okay. But just in terms of us tracking people down.
Well, what we
I remember
know-
last year trying to call people while I'm on vacation, while they're on vacation.
I agree with that.
Well, what we
That's a
know is that
problem.
53 people expire June 30th. So ideally, they would be reappointed before their expiration.
Right.
So it's possible that they're going to have them expire and then have us after the fact to try to confirm a reappointment. But, all we can do is put it out there that if the sooner that they get us any of those names, the sooner we can at least evaluate them and understand. Well, one thing we could do is at least, even though we know we can't make the calls until the mayor actually makes the reappointment, we can't actually make those calls to people. But if at least we have a sense, we can identify people we know, we can do that part of the work. So that would help. I mean, they might be reluctant to give it to us, knowing that they won't make their decision until after budget, but we can ask.
It's available on the website somewhere for all I know. If they
Oh, yeah, an it's still, but if they were able to identify to you that there were 53 people, then they know their names. So it would be helpful to us to have that information. Okay, and then Councilor Labarge had recommended
Steve Connor is in the Veterans Council to come in for our next meeting, which is really critical because we have not had them come in and talk about the Memorial Day Parade and the other functions coming up and so forth.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Agreeable.
That sounds great.
If he's willing to come, that's a good next step for May.
I know my town meetings, he will want to come.
Oh, yeah, he will want to come. He likes, and it usually brings a good entourage.
Yeah.
So we can plan that for May, and then we don't know what'll happen at the next one, the April 4th, and then the April 18th meetings in terms of appointments. But we can figure that for our May meeting, we may likely get a bunch on the 4th and a bunch on, I haven't seen them in the preliminary. You didn't see anything in the
No,
preliminary?
so you should give it to me like Tuesday at like 11:55.
Yeah, so tomorrow then maybe, who knows? But that's what happens is we'll see in the next series of the next 6 meetings, there'll likely be a bunch.
I think we can work something out.
Yeah.
I mean, just like with Paul Spector and those, I mean, we had quite a bit of interviews, and our committee was strictly interviewing.
Well, their committee was only appointments. That was the name of their committee. All they did was appointments.
Right.
So the other thing they could do is, even though we know that there may be issues they're not sure about 20% of them, it wouldn't take much to review that list and send us the names of the people they're sure that they would like to have reappointed.
How are they going to know?
Well, because they can look over and they can say this person's been here and they know, you know what I mean? There's probably a whole bunch of them that they know that they want.
Right.
And if they know
could
that
give us
they
a
want.
head start.
Yeah, I mean, it just ease up. It would just, I'm asking. It's not inappropriate for us to ask, given there'll be so many in a short period of
And
time.
plus the fact is, like, some of them, even who are being reinstated, okay, reappointed, I mean, to go in again, they've already been accepted by the mayor, and then now they're going to be interviewed.
Right. So the sooner we know, the better anyway. And anything they can do to help would be great.
I know. I agree.
Thank you, Laura. Anything else?
We're in good shape.
A motion?
I would move to adjourn.
And moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, everybody, hello. It being 4:01.
I call to order the Committee on City Services and the Northampton City Council. And note, I am Maureen Carney, Chair of this committee. And with us, we have Councilor Marianne Labarge, Councilor Jim Nash, and Councilor Dennis Bidwell, and Clerk to the Council, Laura Kretzel. So that being said, I'll ask any public comments. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any additions, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. And thank you for coming. We have an update today from the Veteran Services Department. We also have, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, and just to note that this is being audio and video recorded. Thank you, Councilor. So thank you for coming. If you'd like to join us here at the table, typically we just have a conversation with folks.
Want me to stand or sit, or?
Whatever's most comfortable for you.
Yeah. All right.
There's wheels on this, so we could race around the room.
This is gonna be scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can start. My name is Tom Hayes. I'm the commander of VFW Post 8006 and also the vice president of the Northampton Veterans Council of Northampton. I've handed out a little agenda sheet here. It entails what we're doing at the VFW and what we're doing citywide with the Veterans Council. One of our first events coming up this Saturday is what we call the OTI training. It's Officer Training Institute, where state officials from the VFW come in to our post and start explaining the proper procedures for the quartermaster, you know, the receipts, the billing, membership, dues, the correct procedures for all the new guys coming in, the new members, so that they understand how the finances are contributed, how we receive money, and so on and so forth. That'll be a full day. We're going to provide some coffee and donuts for them in the morning, and we'll provide them with a meal at noontime. The VFW is also sponsoring a Cruisin' Northampton Classic Car and Truck Show the third Wednesday of May, June, July, and August, located at the Blue Bonnet Diner. It's a fundraising event that we help veterans that are in need, spouses of veterans that are in need. It helps our general fund. We have a raffle, we have some gift cards being given away. This is our third year of doing this. That is strictly the VFW doing that. And again, thank you to Blue Bonnet for letting us use their facilities. One of the citywide events is the annual Memorial Day Parade. This year takes place on Monday, May the 27th.
The 151st.
151st. And I want to remind everyone that last year was the 150th, and they told me that I participated. I don't remember because at the end of the parade I had a heart attack.
Yes, you did.
But thanks to the Cooley Dickinson Hospital, absolutely, they saved my life. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we didn't have enough video for him to remember everything.
Yeah.
We were telling him.
We're working on it. So that steps off at 10 o'clock from Trinity Row in Florence.
No, your note says 11, is
Well, that's the ceremony at the cemetery.
okay, so it's step off
But
10.
the parade will step off. I'm sorry for that mistake.
No problem.
It's always stepped off at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to do the route through Florence. And
get settled inside the cemetery.
The cemetery at the Park Street Cemetery.
So what time does the parade start?
10 o'clock. I'm sorry, right down 10 o'clock.
So try, it's best if you get there 9:30, no later than 9:45, so you know where you're to be and kick off.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that you guys will let us all know that you're going to be there or not. Yes, you've already RSVP'd.
Yeah, we set the
You
tent up.
RSVP'd, okay.
Yeah, we set the tent up and what have you in Senator, so we have like 5 chairs.
Yeah, just let
I'm
Becky
usually
know.
there.
Yes, I know, it's just,
I know.
we realized last year, it's a lot better if we know.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we end up going looking and saying, geez, maybe they're gone to the wrong place, something like that. So
Yeah.
if we know you're going to be there, then we can look for it in case we don't see it.
A little added feature this year also, we're going to have a narrator. I talked to Ryan Joyce, who will be narrating the parade from the little triangular, it's where the water fountain is across from the VFW. We're going to have speakers set up there. So because it worked out so well last year, we're going to do that again this year. And Brian Joyce has offered, well, kind of got hoped to do it.
He was voluntold.
Yeah, he was voluntold, yep. So that's going to be pretty good. And the VFW, you can, myself and a few of the other members, we've been working on the flyover, and we've got 2 F-16 fixed-wing jets going to be doing a flyover, providing we have no cloud cover. Last year they were assigned also, but they have to fly, it has to be 3,000 feet. And had too much cloud cover and they couldn't pull it off. So I've been talking to the people involved. The jets are actually, I'll tell you a quick story. I got a phone call from Will Sparrow. He says, I said, how you all doing up there? I said, fine. He says, I'm calling in conjunction with your request for 2 aircraft. Yep. Well, I'm in Montgomery, Alabama. I says, you're coming up from Montgomery, Alabama? Well, what's happened is Barnes Air Force Base, they're going to be deployed. Most of their equipment is going to be gone. So they're sending 2 jets up to Quonset Bay in Rhode Island. They'll be stationed there for that weekend. They're also doing Ludlow, I believe Chicopee, and us. So they're doing the flyovers. They're sending 2 jets up for that. So it's kind of neat.
And they go pretty fast, so they can cover us pretty quickly.
They can cover the area.
But they don't keep anything at Westover? I mean, I know it's mostly the transport.
If I wanted
stuff,
anything from Westover, it'd be one of the C5As, one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And they will assign that, you know, if those people in Montgomery or whoever didn't pick that up, there may even be, there could have been a couple of helicopters. But it just so happens that it came up on their computer that, you know, if you want to do this flight pattern, blah, blah, blah. In fact, I had to give them the flight pattern. I says, well, you have to head east to west on, no, Capital Retreat.
East to west on 9.
East to west on 9. I said, just rip it up Main Street. So that's all set, providing we get the weather. So it's pretty neat. Now, also, every year during the parade, one of our service organizations has to provide a collation or a bite to eat after the parade for any of the participants. Last year, the VFW did it in conjunction with the Elks at the Elks. This year, the Elks reached out to us and asked if they could use our parking lot. And I said, of course, and I've been working with the Exalted Ruler, and we're going to be setting up our tent in the parking lot, so any and all participants are invited to come over and have a hot dog or a hamburger, bag of chips and water.
So they can just walk over rather than going to the park.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, get more recognition. And that's just an example of a couple of clubs, the Lodge and the VFW, working together, not opposing each other. So things, it's really neat that, they reached out to us, we reached out to them, and it's all good. And so the ceremony will take place in the park. We will post the colors. I've been asked to be the speaker this year, so I've already got my speech all lined up. This year's theme will be just about sacrifice and survivors of the family that has been left behind. The next event is the annual Flag Day ceremony.
Right, which I'm going to talk to them about the Field of Honor.
Okay, well, that...
No, I just brought my check over today.
All right. The next thing the VFW is doing in July, we have our annual pig roast. That's another fundraising event in the parking lot at the VFW. This will be our 6th year. Last year we had to skip it because I wasn't around. Then we move on.
And I'm not bringing Seamus or Raphael.
Yeah.
Neither one of them are going.
The next event.
Do they need to buy tickets in advance? Is this usually a...
Yeah, we'll post it. It'll be on our website. Okay. It'll be advertised in the newspaper also. It'll be live entertainment outside.
You gotta get tickets, $20 a person, 5 kids, and they'll, it just says, he says the tickets will be on their website.
Yeah, it'll be on our website. And we'll
Typically-
advertise in the paper and do a little
And
bit.
typically, people buy them right then? and
They can,
put it-
they are, oh
okay,
yeah.
but
We
you want-
we
you
usually
get
have
a count.
plenty of food, so that's not, that's.
Is this
it won't be a
inside?
hardship.
Yes, right?
What's that?
Inside.
Outside, rain or shine, and if it's raining, we'll move it inside. Typically, we set the tent up, and a couple of years ago, we had a dunking tank. You never guessed who had to sit in that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And we move on to the Veterans Day Parade. There will be a parade this year. It'll step off at 11 o'clock from Lamprey Park and proceed up Main Street, Northampton, to Pulaski Park, where we will have a ceremony there to recognize all our veterans and the activities that day. We are in the process of developing a brunch or a breakfast. We're not totally sold on a breakfast yet, but Steve and I and a couple of the other members are talking about a brunch, possibly having a brunch at the Senior Center or the World War II Club, so that, you know, we get maybe more participation from people right here where the ceremony takes place at Pulaski Park. Then we can move on down to the Senior Center or the World War II Club, because both places hold about 150 or 200 people.
Yeah, the senior center's a bigger space.
Yes, it's bigger.
So we'll see. Basically, what we've done for the last dozen years is we've always had like a breakfast, the Veterans Day breakfast or a veterans breakfast, and it hasn't been on that day. And then we've had the parade and the ceremony with the speaker, and the whole thing with not having it last year. We still had the ceremony and the speaker. We just didn't do the parade, but because it's chilly. I mean, those that remember being in front of Memorial Hall in the shade, it's nice and cold. So the idea is we will have the parade, we'll have the ceremony, but the speaker won't be there. The speaker will be at the breakfast or the brunch, whichever end we do it on. And that's where they're gonna talk, so not everybody's freezing and going like this instead of listening to what
It's a
they're
more
saying.
brief ceremony.
Yeah, it'll be a briefer ceremony after the parade, and then we carry it over to either before or after. I like the idea of after, but we'll see.
Yeah. And we've requested a flyover for that day, but it's so far out right now that they've received our request, but they just have not done a confirmation with it. But we've requested a flyover for Veterans Day also. The last thing we do at the VFW is we have bingo every Friday night, so all I can say is, you know, the community, anybody's welcome to come in, and that is, actually the bingo was moved from the Holly Street, what is it, St. John's?
St. John's campus.
Yeah, they closed it up and moved it up to our place. So.
How's it doing?
Well, I guess they're doing, Angie's running it, and they're renting a hall, which helps us, and so, but it's still open to the community.
Yeah.
So any and all are welcome. You should talk about the,
What time is the bingo? Just to
so it starts at 6:15, but
On
they start
Wednesday?
coming in about 1
Friday
o'clock.
nights, right? Friday nights?
Every Friday night at
People come in
6:15.
at 1?
Oh, sure. some of the-
Well, my grandmother used to go in first thing in the morning as soon as they opened it. She'd get her chair and all her cards
Right,
lined
you gotta
up.
line them up.
Nobody could
And
take
you
her
gotta
favorite chair.
You gotta get all your stickers.
Toys, elephants and
Well, that.
Well, you have those stickers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you see
line up
that. They come in with a bag
toys.
full of the markers.
Yep, little markers, little tabs. Yep.
Next thing you know, we'll have a casino.
Before you start on that, what we are, I have to bring it back up to our membership. I have a post meeting this Wednesday night, and we're gonna again work to, I didn't put this on the agenda because we haven't voted on it, but I am going to do another policeman's award evening and a fireman's award evening again. But I can't put anything in writing yet because I haven't talked with the chiefs. And, you know, this past year we had in October and, what was it, March? Yeah. And
That
we
was
will
good,
be
too.
doing, we'll most likely be doing that again because, you know, there's gonna be some officer or firefighter that's gonna be deserving of something. So we will be doing that, and I will let you know when the dates are, but we have to put it in front of the members first. Okay?
All right. Just to tie in, when we were talking about all the ceremonies, the other thing that's happening for the first time this year is we are doing us and the Elks and participation from the other groups, so we didn't get anything official. Field of Honor They've had it in a few communities, one in West Springfield and Mansfield, Mass, but it's an opportunity to have a whole lot of flags put up. And you can sponsor flags in your name and somebody else's name. You could ask for a whole lot of them in your name. It is being done as a community event, a community experience. What we're really hoping is that it'll be very attractive to the eye, but we're also looking that it's going to start on Armed Forces Day weekend, and it's going to go right past the 4th of July. So we're planning some things for the community around Memorial Day. Also something on Flag Day, for the Flag Day ceremony that the Veterans Council puts on with the Elks. And we're also thinking that maybe something around the 4th of July as well, because it's going to be an opportunity for people to sponsor and put up flags. And this year, it's not going to be perfect because we're doing it on the fly, first time ever. But it looks like it's going to be good. We're looking at 150 flags we're hoping to be able to get sponsored and put out. And anybody in the community can walk through the flag area and people can have their names put on it.
Can you just say where that flag area is again?
It's going to be at the Elks.
Oh, at the Elks, okay.
Right, so they have all those grounds there on the left. And we're going to be putting up a whole 2 rows of flags all the way down, and depending on how big it gets.
5 by 5.
Right. So that is in conjunction with the city, because we want it to be a community event. And we're hoping to grow it next year. The Veterans Council will have time to comprehend all of it and also get more on board. But we really wanted to get it done this year to get a start. So we're going for it.
So in terms of that, for folks, I mean, if they want to, you want outreach to the community for folks to sponsor a flag or
Right. So so the way the sponsorship works is you can get, if you want to sponsor, there's everything from $2,500 for corporate or a big organization to sponsor, and they get like 15 flags and they get noticed on all the different things that are going out that they've sponsored it. Everything down to individuals can purchase, $50. For $50, they can get a flag and recognition. So if, like my father and 4 uncles were all veterans, I could sit there and say, I want to put a flag and I want their names to be put at somewhere on the flagpole to recognize that they were veterans that they served. And it's for veterans, and they're talking about first responders. But again, this is our first attempt, so we're getting it out, and we want to tie in other events around.
Good evening and welcome to the teen meeting of the Northampton School Committee. My name is David Narkowitz, the mayor, and I'm chairing the meeting. I want to begin by asking the clerk to please call the roll of the school committee.
Mayor David Narkowitz.
Present.
Ms. Molly Burnham. Present. Mr. Rebecca Jasinski is not here tonight. Ms. Laura Fallon. Present. Ms. Ann Hennessy. Present. Mr. Lonnie Kaufman. Present. Mr. Downey Meyer cannot make it tonight. Mr. Howard Moore.
Here.
Ms. Susan Boggs. Present. Mr. Enzenhouse.
Present.
Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Excellent. I just want to let the members of the public know that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. We begin each meeting with a public comment period, and we ask if there's members of the public who wish to speak in public comment to please step forward to the podium. And I don't know if we have anyone signed up. Okay, there's no one signed up. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in public comment? Was that a yes or no? Oh, okay, all right, just making sure. Okay, don't want to force anybody. Next, I'll ask if there are any announcements from members of the school committee. Anyone making, yes, Ms. Burnham.
I have 2 announcements. I'll start by, I'd like to thank Laura Fallon. Laura served on the MASC Resolution Committee, and there was no resolution around charter school funding, and she put forward a resolution. All the resolutions will be submitted to the board on Thursday, and the ones that pass will be sent to the delegate assembly at the MASC conference in November to be voted on by delegates across the state and will drive the advocacy for that year. So I'd like to publicly thank Laura for doing that great work. And the second announcement is, after thinking long and hard, I've decided to run for Ward 5 Ann Hennessy's seat as opposed to the at-large position that I have been in. So I've taken my papers out and will be getting those back. So I wanted the public to know that I won't be running for the at-large seat that I hold right now, but for Ward 5, which is my neighborhood, and I wanted to get a little smaller and work just in my neighborhood.
Excellent. Any other announcements? Ms. Fallon?
I did just want to thank Ms. Burnham for spending the day in Revere and speaking out so strongly against the expansion.
It's Revere.
It's clearly not a name. Yeah, so to speak out against the expansion of the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School. So I know that was a long trip, and I appreciate you doing it.
Great.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hennessy, for that translation service. Any other announcements from the school committee? Okay, next we will move on to recommended actions rather. We have the approval of the minutes of the school committee meeting of June 13th, 2019, and the field trip approval of the Jackson Street School trip to Nature's Classroom in Beckett, Massachusetts, October 15th to the 18th, 2019. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there a question?
I have one and maybe two corrections to the notes.
Okay. So then we'll take the minutes off of the consent agenda and we'll just vote on the approval of the remaining item, which is the field trip approval. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, as with one item removed, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And if you would maybe make a motion for the minutes with whatever amendments you'd like to see to them.
Okay.
Or corrections, rather.
They're very minor, I think, but I just wanted to make sure they were correct. Sorry, I'm getting the page back. So the motion would be under public comment period. The second person, I believe, should be Kate Dollard, not with a B. I believe it's D-O-L-L-A-R-D. I'm not sure if there's
Probably
one.
the spell checker turned it into Bollard.
Probably.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not sure about this, so others can chime in, but we have future business and meeting dates, and I recall that maybe the superintendent evaluation subcommittee was changed and did not happen on June 17th, but it appears in these notes that it might have.
That was probably meant to be July.
I think it's the 24th.
It was changed because of negotiations.
Yeah, it got changed because of negotiations, I remember. Yeah.
It might have been correct at the time. It was.
Yeah.
It was correct.
It was on the
Fine.
agenda and then.
it got changed after. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So would you move to approve with those two changes?
I would.
Okay. Is there a second? Any other comments? All those in favor then of approving the minutes with those changes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So now we'll move into the reports and recommendations, and we will begin with the introduction of our new principal at Leeds Elementary Schools, Christine Wentz. And so would you please step forward to the podium and...
Short.
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Provost, Mayor, and all the school committee members for the opportunity to introduce myself to the larger district community as principal of Leeds Elementary School. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be part of such a positive community. I feel very fortunate to have participated in the ALT retreat in June to begin preparing for the upcoming school year. And the Northampton administrative leadership team has been very warming, welcoming, supportive. It's been wonderful. In my first 5 days at Leeds, I've had the opportunity to meet many students, families, staff members, and attend the Summer Eats kickoff at Ryan Road today. At the Family Fourth celebration, members of the Leeds PTO introduced me to many students and families from Leeds and all over Northampton. It was a great event to be at. Together with the support of the PTO, we have set up several opportunities for caregivers and community members to meet before school begins. So on July 17th, you can stop by for coffee, tea, and pastry in the Leeds Playground at 9 a.m. August 1st at 6 p.m., we'll offer pizza with the principal on the playground. August 24th, students, caregivers, and community members are welcome to a chalk draw at Leeds Playground at 10 a.m. And also, we're setting up an evening at Meadowbrook for an outreach meet and greet. The date and time will be set shortly. And all of those, of course, are weather permitting. We'll be inside if there is some weather issues. During the next months, I'll be establishing new relationships with the community. It's my intention to continue the legacy of Mr. Kanata, to collaborate with all stakeholders to support the district's core values, providing engaging learning experiences, enabling students to reach their potential, all while nurturing kindness and empathy. Throughout my educational career, I've built many positive relationships with students, caregivers, and stakeholders, and really look forward to developing many more at Leeds and in Northampton. As many of you may know or not know, I am in the process of relocating and have found a residence in Florence. So I'll be moving in August, and I'm very excited to become part of the Northampton community. So, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very
you.
much. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Principal Wentz? Dr. Provost?
I do not.
Okay.
I asked her a bunch of questions before I hired her.
Right, yes. Already answered all of his questions. So we'll welcome, and we look forward to working with you as part of the ALT team.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a vote. This is on transition coordinator. I believe we'll recognize Pam Plummer, who's here. And is this a job description?
Job description.
Yes, so this is the approval of a job description.
Right. So you had a chance to ask questions around the time the budget was approved, but this is the job description that we gathered based on some of the feedback some of the discussion we had at that meeting, and also local and national job descriptions for transition coordinators. And ours is a half-time position, but it's, I think it's doable with this job description.
Okay. Are there questions from Mr. Yes?
I think that my biggest concern is that there are so many bullet points on, and when I get to the bottom and it says 3.5 hours a day working, I sort of wonder if not to micromanage, but if some of those bullet points are embedded in some of the other tasks.
Yep, they certainly are, and I think also it was why it was important in different spots where we said they serve as a consultant, the liaison. The liaison still has these other roles. It's not taking over these positions, because right now we have nobody doing the position. And I think it also is clear that certainly the primary goal for this position is to start with our 18 to 22-year-old students and be able to shift down from there as time allows. Which absolutely is doable for the upcoming year. As time goes on, we're actually going to have a lot more 18 to 22-year-old students. We actually have some local smaller school districts who are looking to tuition students into our programs. So I think to start with that focus is important, and to grow, but to be able to start with a 0.5 position focused on that smaller group of students is doable for sure.
It's really great having, dear friends who do have children that have that same need. I'm very moved that we're thinking of the whole community, but it is a lot of bullet points.
So I had Mr. Moore, and then I'll come back to you.
I don't know, this isn't really in the job description, but it seems like there's some of the things might overlap with the whoever is sort of coordinating internships at the high school. And in terms of the bullet points, if there would be a way to, particularly in terms of, identifying sort of, whatever you call them, jobs or placements, community resources, if that is possible to coordinate those two lists as opposed to having two possibly competing or overlapping lists.
Yeah, that's absolutely a goal. We also have our pre-ETS program, which we just found out that Riverside is our pre-ETS organization that we'll be working with. So it's, lots of different pieces. I think this position for me, the key piece is they're like the case manager for the students that we absolutely have to be making sure these programs are solid and in place for. Certainly some of the internship sites, there will be some overlap, and over time, there'll be a lot more knowledge of where these resources in the community exist. They're there now, where our connections are just sort of, they're not as strong as I'd like them to be.
Ms. Voss.
I'm just curious how many students we have right now in that 18 to 22, and how quickly you see it growing, and how fast. What do you see it growing to in the next few years?
We have a number of juniors. I don't know the numbers precisely, but I'd say like close to a half a dozen juniors, or going into senior year, actually. We have a lot of students going into senior year. And then we have a couple of students at Riverside, a few students who access services at the Prospect Meadow Farm. We have a student who's going into the ICE program at UMass next year, which requires, they all just require so much troubleshooting and management. It's not a lot of students, but it really does require a lot, being able to respond and knowing that that's, you as the liaison, you're the primary person and that's your responsibility. There aren't any other things on your plate. But over time, we have a number of students coming, and as I mentioned, some students who are looking to tuition in also, so because some of these smaller towns don't have programs, so yeah.
Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. So I share the same concerns when I first read this as Mrs. Berman. First of all, let me thank you again. You know, I'm a big fan of this, and we've talked about it and stuff, so thank you for reaching out. But it kind of feels like you've gotten all these great sort of potential functions, and it just feels rather overwhelming for a half-time person. So I'm just concerned about running the risk of alienating someone that's interested and just says, I just can't do this. Can we add language that says, due to the fact that this is a .5 position, some of these essential functions will need to be prioritized?
Oh, yeah, if that's allowable. I'm not well versed in how the job descriptions get edited after this point, but I think that's totally reasonable. Certainly that's how I would see it as the supervisor of this
Right.
person.
I mean, if we had full-time, would you add to this?
I think we wouldn't add to this. I think we'd spread down. We'd be able to start going earlier and earlier in the students'
With more students,
experience. Yeah.
So that was one. Are you looking to Dr. Provost to say whether that's okay?
Well, I think right now they're all called essential functions, so
Right.
it's hard to say that some of the essential functions are not so essential. I think the way to do it is to maybe have a list of essential functions and then have a list of other duties. And if you can find things that you could move from the essential function list to the other duties list.
That would be helpful, I think. The other is, in reading this, unless I missed it, I didn't know whether this was is this a teacher A position?
Yes.
So I don't think that's there.
Unit A?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was on my draft.
Yes.
It's
Because
not.
it could be seen as administrative job, but the title of coordinator, so I think that would be
Right.
helpful for candidates. I also am concerned because it reads to me like a case manager, like you said, and a systems builder, and someone who's developing relationships that are going to be long-lasting and deeper and better for families, and doing PD for teachers and educators and being a liaison with the community. That in and of itself is a monstrous kind of position. But what scares me is that there's a number of bullets there that talk about direct service with students. And my concern, having seen this many times, is that a systems builder kind of person is difficult for people to comprehend, and they begin to ask that person to do a job that sucks up all their time, like, can you find this kid a position, or can you support them on the job? And so I'm concerned that you're running the risk of adding too many elements of direct service here without a caveat, which I noticed you added before about attending transition planning meetings, like you purposely said you won't be attending all of them. There's not that many even, but I'm more concerned about the fact that it says pretty explicitly the direct service component. And so I'm wondering, is that something that you share my concerns, and if so, is there anything you can do to add the language here? Because again, I think a candidate would be equally as concerned if they wanted to get out of that realm and move into a more of a management coordinator, systems building position, they would be concerned.
I definitely see it as absolutely possible for our core group of students who currently are 18 to 22 as being able to provide, honestly, our sites provide most of the direct care. But at this point, there's none, right? There's really no link between a person who is going between that site and coming back to the school and sharing what's happening and being able to make those connections. So to start, I think it's totally doable. If we were to think that that person would be able to do it for all of the 18 to 22 students plus the students 14 to 18 who are possibly going to get services 18 to 22 and beyond that, then I think it would be very, very difficult. But that's not what I'm foreseeing, at least at the beginning. We could put a caveat in.
I guess I'm just confused. I mean, bullets that say work with individual students or group of students to prepare them for the workplace, including a laundry list of things. There was about job placement, working with, utilizing the work-based learning plan or similar to those. Do you understand my concern?
Those are the things that the sites are doing.
Yeah.
There's just,
Yeah.
there has to be someone from the Northampton Public Schools who's connected to that
Sure.
to ensure that that's occurring.
Absolutely.
So I don't see that they'll be creating a whole lot.
Right.
It's really just partnering. So the language could be different.
Maybe that was what I got out of it.
Similar
It's
to the
just-
language with the special education
Absolutely.
liaisons.
Right.
It's really partnering to ensure it occurs
Yeah.
versus so we have our OT and our
Yeah.
speech language pathologists, they are doing all this direct work.
Yeah.
But then connecting it to the work that's happening outside, I think that's the place where.
I think we're saying the same thing. So when
Yeah.
I read it, I was concerned
Okay.
it's about job placement. I didn't want that person to lose the other responsibilities you want them to do. So if I'm just one person and I read it that way, I think it would be helpful to look at just making sure that, I think the wording of case management sounds good, like it's not direct service. And if it was direct service, as you know, it just takes so many hours, and I think that would alienate some people that are ready for this position.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Okay.
One
Ms.
last.
Hennessy.
I think this is great, and I do understand what he's saying about that one. And I get the 18 to 22-year-old, that this where the focus will have to be, and that this hasn't. You've been doing this with your team.
Mm-hmm. And the high school folks have been doing it. Yep.
So do you feel like this will initially take a lot of your time to supervise?
Mhm.
And how much are you concerned about that?
No.
Okay.
Because right now
You're
yeah, and it's so spread out, and counting on so many people, and to know that, we all have a vision, and I think it's a similar vision. It's just that person who can ensure that these 3 steps happen in order to make it, in order to make the outcomes that we're looking for these students happen. That's the piece that's just not there right now, and it's so hard because we all have competing, really seriously competing issues that pop up, and to prioritize things is really hard. So to know somebody, this is going to be their primary priority is just really, it feels really good.
So for a little while, it'll be a little.
For a little
bit harder
while,
to play. Great.
yeah.
As long as it's a little while.
Yeah.
So, are there any other questions? Ms. Fallon, you seem puzzled.
I'm perplexed with all of if we're supposed to be voting on this in concept or voting on this actual description with all of the changes that have been suggested.
I think I don't know that there were changes that suggested. There was one caveat language put in. And there was also a suggestion that they be some actions, outside duties, be changed to outside duties. So, yes.
Can I offer an amendment to the motion, which would be the motion as stated with the addition to leave it up to Dr. Plummer to figure out what makes sense in terms of our feedback and to approve it with that caveat.
Okay.
That'd be great, because I'd love to hire this person.
So that's the motion. Ms. Fallon, would you second that motion? Okay. Any other questions about the description? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that is approved. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Plummer. Next, we have a series of donations. The first is a donation from the NHS PTO to the Math Department, $1,000, Art Department, $1,000, Science Department, $600, Sound Equipment, $1,350, for a total of $3,950. Do you have anything to add about those?
No, I think that details all the information that I have as well.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept the donation from the Northampton High School PTO in the amount of $3,950.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next, we have another donation from the NHS PTO. This is broken down: chorus field trips 1,000, robotics class software 1,000, goals class 250, for a total of $2,250. Anything unique about these? Okay.
Motion to accept the gift donation from the Northampton High School PTO in the amount of $2,250.
Is there a second? Okay. Any questions about this one? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? And then finally, we have a gift from the Bridge Street PTO to the Lego League Junior Robotics Program, $4,000. Ms. Lemica, is there anything?
The only piece I'd like to add is that it's going to fund the elementary school team registrations and participation in the first Lego League Junior Robotics Program.
Okay, excellent.
I'll make a motion to accept the donation from the Bridge Street PTO in the amount of $4,000.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
And once again, just a grand thank you to the PTOs for this gift of over $10,000 to Northampton Public Schools. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Next, we have a report from Ms. Fallon, and this is on the Collaborative for Educational Services, which she now represents the school committee on.
I do. And I don't know that I appreciated Mr. Moore's service in that respect until I sat on it myself and approved our first budget and needed them to, they printed out 3 pages of acronyms for me because everything's an acronym. All of the grants, all of the state grants, federal grants, everything's an acronym. So, yeah, it's a steep learning curve. But in the process of our last meeting, we were looking at amending the Articles of Agreement. And I noticed that the state law required us to report out to the school committee 4 times a year, but our Articles of Agreement for the collaborative said that we were to report back every meeting. And so I made the mistake of bringing it up, and there's pretty clear consensus among the 30 other members present that that was something that I needed to be doing. So
my apology for only reporting back like a couple of times a year.
Well, ironically, the reason that we were reviewing the Articles of Agreement was to amend them to establish a policy committee, and because I noted that, I am now one of the 2 representatives on the policy committee for the collaborative. So that didn't go as well as I'd hoped. But anyway, what I'm hoping to do is, you all should have gotten this afternoon, after each meeting, Bill Deal publishes an executive director's report, and it's usually between 8 and 15 pages. I'll have that sent to you, and I'm going to make my report less than 2 minutes and just pick out the highlights of the things that I think are interesting. But if you ever have questions about anything, you can ask me, or I'm assuming Dr. Provost would be able to answer. So the report will be pretty short. The 2019 Summer Academy is in session now with 23 workshops in the areas of history and social studies, special ed, math, science, English language learners, social justice and equity, technology, Google Apps, reading, literacy, trauma, and effective teaching. Another thing that I thought was great was that in order to support member districts who are co-teaching, they're working on assembling a cohort for an advanced training and coaching experience for co-teaching teams. Something that I am crossing my fingers for is that they're investigating other potential shared services and opportunities to save districts money. And so at the request of several superintendents, they've been investigating translation services that can meet written or verbal translation needs in multiple languages. So they're discussing a possible partnership with Lexicate, a digital translation and interpretation service, to offer special pricing to collaborative members. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. And then something else that I thought was really interesting is that the collaboratives just launched a program to host 4 summer interns from area colleges, and it's the colleges that pay the interns as part of their educational experience. So they will be having a Mount Holyoke student working under the supervision of the Director of Development in coordination with alternative education, professional services, research and evaluation on a project titled STEM Education and Pathways, Needs and Assets in the Pioneer Valley, which I thought was really a great thing to do, and the results will be reported to superintendents at their roundtable meetings. and made available to the board with the goal of mapping resources and identifying both institutional partners and, more importantly, funding partners to help address STEM needs. So that's my 2-minute collaborative report.
Thank you very much. While you have the floor, we'll turn to the report of the Rules and Policy Subcommittee and several first readings that you have on policies tonight.
Right, so they are all first readings. We won't be taking a vote this month. The first reading, if you all recall, we had Noah Cassis, a student at NHS, who spoke to us at our public comment during the last meeting about a proposed revision to our acceptable use policy. He worked with the IT department and district administrators, and then also attended our subcommittee meeting to establish that there was an appropriate procedure in place to protect student data privacy, and he was presented a revision to help the rest of the student body to be confident that their personal data is protected. You all should have the policy. There are minor changes to it. And I hope you note the yellow.
I did,
And
thank
that
you
was
very
really
much.
helpful. Okay. So the language that's been added is that our schools have software and systems in place that monitor and record all internet usage, that the district will make a summary of the procedures governing the use of these softwares and systems public in clear, accessible format in the handbook on the district website. The district will intermittently monitor internet network traffic and other usage of electronic resources, for instance, by tracking destination URLs of individual users. Users should have no expectation of privacy when browsing the web, sending or receiving email, or using other electronic school resources. The district does provide email accounts for the purpose of school-related communication. We also just replaced language where it referred to the district to read the Northampton Public Schools, and made some, I think we just changed student handbook to lowercase letters. And that was always changed on the acceptable use policy, which is policy
IJNDB.
Thank you, IJNDB.
Yeah, a note, just on the copy that we got, there's a place where in that paragraph it's highlighted. The first couple of sentences is a redundancy. It's a cut and paste that doesn't have the addition in it. You see that? So where it says our schools have software and systems in place, that's the same as under the yellow highlighted, our schools have software and systems in place. So really it's
right. So
what we're reading, that's not what's the word? Scrivener's error?
Yeah.
Sorry, Scrivener. That's not the text we're talking about. The text we're talking about is the part that's bolded and yellowed.
Right. So the Scrivener's error we will have remedied before we bring it to you for a vote next month. And then next up we have Section D, essentially of our policies that you referred to us to review. The financial auditor would recommend that we review the entire Section D, which is,
Oh, sorry.
If I have a question on this, should I ask it now, or should I wait?
Sure,
till
on the
you-
acceptable use policy? Sure.
It's minor, thank you for this. As you know, I care about this a lot. Two minor things. One, after your big yellow thing, you just need a period. And a question I have, if you go back to the second sentence of this policy, which I understand is quite old, by providing intranet and internet access, do we actually have intranet?
No, we talked about
that was something we discussed during the meeting.
And I believe we do. I can't 100% say that that is the case, but I do know that we have some very old structures within the district that I'm not sure have been eliminated. So I was uncomfortable getting rid of that for that reason.
Might be worth just asking before the next reading, because in my travels to Northampton Public Schools, I've never come across it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist for some of our employees. But I don't think it exists for students anymore.
Yeah, we can certainly verify that before next
It
meeting.
makes us look like we're in the dark ages if we don't have it, I think.
Okay. Was that all?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. And so we were reviewing Section D at the recommendation of our financial auditor. Section D refers to fiscal management. And we're to review that periodically, and it had been a while, so we will be going through the entire section. These first, we decided to divide it up to make it easier. These are all first readings. The first policy is policy DA, fiscal management goals. As you can see, the only thing that we will be changing on that is the adoption date or the revision date when it is approved by the committee. Policy DB, annual budget. The language was modified. This was taken, some of it was taken from the MASC August 2016 update because ours hadn't been updated prior to that since 2003. To read that the annual budget is the financial expression of the educational program of the school department and it reflects the goals and objectives of the school committee to meet the needs of all students. The budget then is more than just a financial instrument and requires on the part of the committee, the staff, and the community an orderly and cooperative effort to ensure sound fiscal practices for achieving the educational goals and objectives of the school district. Can I keep going? Mm-hmm. Okay. Policy DBD is budget goals and objectives. That had initially come from the policy manual from 1978 for the Northampton School Department, and we would like to revise it pretty substantially to read the first priority in the development of an annual budget will be the educational welfare of the children in our schools consistent with the interests of the taxpayers. Before voting to adopt the budget, the committee will scrutinize it thoroughly so that it may be adhered to as adopted. However, the committee recognizes that unforeseen circumstances may require transfers between accounts during a fiscal year. The superintendent will have overall responsibility for budget preparation, adhering to deadlines set forth in the city charter. Next,
Well, it is a period charter.
Next up, we have policy DBJ, budget transfer authority. The only change to this is in the last paragraph where it says, before the end of each fiscal year, the school committee shall hold a vote to grant the superintendent or his or her designee the authority without the above $10,000 restriction to transfer funds to close the fiscal year books. Next, we have policy DD, funding proposals and applications. We are proposing that we eliminate in the third paragraph the last part of the sentence to read the superintendent will be responsible for seeking out and coordinating the development of proposals for all specially funded projects. Dr. Provost had mentioned the sheer number of grants and proposals that were generated, and we didn't feel the need to have those submitted to the committee for approval due to the time-sensitive nature of so many of them.
I'd also point out that many of those are done collaboratively through the collaborative, and oftentimes we have just a matter of days in order to sign on if we want to try to be a part of the grant that the collaborative is seeking. So it just, I don't think would be feasible to bring them all before the school committee for approval.
Right.
So I understand the intention there, and I agree with it, but a question I have is, what if there was a proposal that required any sort of spending long-term in a budget from the school committee? Would that not be part of this? So, you know, there's a grant that says, we want to do this, and we're going to pay for this, but you have to match it in some way. That kind of thing, I would want to make sure did come to the school committee. And is that covered? How do I see that?
So if there was a funding proposal that required us to add resources for a match, then it certainly would be part of the budget. But many of the times when we have grants that require matching funds, we're doing it with existing resources. So for example, a match could be that we provide the building that it takes place in. Or the match could be that we provide some of the accounting for it through our business office. So those matches are all done, and they are real matches. They are a contribution of resources from the district, but they're not additional resources. If we had a situation where we needed to create a new position or create or buy some new equipment in order to meet a match, then it would come to the school committee through the budget process.
I'm just
That's helpful. I think, also though, if there's, say, equipment that needs to be purchased down the road, that, you know, maybe whatever this proposal is, buys certain equipment for the first couple years, and then we have to provide equipment in future years, that kind of thing I'd also want to come to the school committee. I don't know how to articulate that. I could give a specific example, but how would you go, how do we make sure that we have control over that long-term spending?
Well, I'm really not aware of any situations where you're under an obligation in order to continue to provide a match after the grant runs out. Sometimes you are during the grant period, but once they're no longer providing funding for you, there's no leverage really. Sometimes there are situations where we will initiate a program based on resources receiving through a grant and then not be able to fund them through the budget, and then the program might end. But I just can't think of a situation where we'd be committing future budgets to resources by participating in a grant in the current budget.
And these are also coming out of MASC, right? A lot of this work is coming out of the things that you checked on? Some of it, not all of it?
Not all of it.
Okay.
Not all of it. Sometimes we do have slight variations. I can compare the two. Oh, wait. I have all of it.
So is this from MASC or is this our own edit?
This edit, I believe, was ours.
And I wonder if we might want to consider modifying the edit. I understand the reason for it, and it's very reasonable, but modifying it to some extent with, yes, the superintendent will be responsible for seeking and coordinating the development of proposals for all specially funded projects. That's very broad, and I could see a lot of things fitting under what Dr. Provost said, and that's fine. But I do think there's situations where it's, you know, you would use some judgment and perhaps bring some of these things to the school committee. And at a minimum, I'd like to consider putting in here, and the school committee will be notified, or we're aware of it at least, so that we know what we're committing to.
So I will tell you, Dr. Voss, that when I'm looking at the MASC policy, that what they did do is they put a note at the bottom and said that regulations for staff investigation and submission of proposals are frequently needed to implement a policy in this area. So I guess their view was to do it through, that they understood that some of this was going to be at the regulations level and not at the policy level, but they did include language in the policy that the superintendent will be responsible for seeking out, coordinating the development of proposals for all specially funded projects and for submitting the proposals to the committee for approval.
Ms. Voss,
I'll give a
your
specific
concerns
example.
about long-term life.
I'll give a specific example, and I hesitate because I don't know all the details, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to pick on one specific thing, but we have a global STEM program, which is fantastic, and it came with outside funding, but it also required some matching funding, and it serves a relatively small number of kids and is quite expensive, and it's in our budget. And I think when stuff like that comes in, we should be aware of what we're signing up for, and it lasts for several years. So that's the kind of thing that I would want as a school committee member to know that we were entering and have a sense of how much is it going to cost us over the next few years and have some conversation about, instead of just letting it be. So that's one example. I don't know.
Okay. Dr. Provost?
And that's an example of an item that comes through the budget. When we started the Global STEM program, it was part of my first few budget and then the budget that the school committee adopted for that reason. There was grant funding, but there was new district funds that needed to be committed in order to do it, and so that's why I see it separate from these other types of proposals where CES, for example, says we're applying for the Title III grant as a consortium for the whole district, for all of our member districts. If you want to participate, you need to sign up in the next 3 days.
So I wonder, I'm trying to see this as an opportunity. So if we knew that we were if we were agreeing to something, I'm totally hearing what you're saying, but if we knew we were agreeing to something, then later on when you came to us and said, now the grant funding has run out, but we want, I want your approval for additional dollars, that seems like a winning thing. I mean, you previously endorsed this. So not only that, but, I was struck with what Laura had shared before about all the things that CS is doing. And it was great to hear everything they're doing. And I didn't know which parts of those we're involved with and aren't, which is secondary. But I just wonder if there's a way, without giving you too much more work, but if there's a way we can know, like on a monthly or bi-monthly, every 2-month basis, of which grants we have put in. What are we eligible for? What are we waiting to hear about? It would seem like an exciting way to keep up with this stuff, and it would seem like it might accomplish part of what Dr. Voss is asking for, which is we would know right up front. So it'd be kind of a win-win if that's at all doable, because I was very impressed with the fact that CS is doing all these things. So can we do a similar type of thing very briefly to say these are the grants and the proposals that we have put in as a district? Does that sound like
I think that might be something we could add to one of the reports. The barrier that I'm trying to avoid is getting approval before the application's
I'm
been.
not advocating for that at all. No, I'm not. I'm just saying, so I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying, in the spirit of what Dr. Voss was saying, even if we were notified that we might be into it, and then we get it, it seemed like momentum would be there to support the long term.
Sure.
And we'd be aware of it, and I think it would be a winning. I'm just trying to put a positive spin on it.
Right.
Positive opportunity around an idea that there's some chances there for us to be more informed about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I do believe that's consistent with my practice on a lot of things, like the Innovation Pathway Grant and the grant for the Cisco Academy, where I didn't know if we would get it or not, but I did want to make the school committee aware because I think it had potential educational impact.
Absolutely.
And there are other things like that that we could certainly
right. And if
do.
there's more, we'd love to know more, I guess, is what I'm saying. But that's a good example.
Ms. Fallon.
I guess I just wanted to understand, is there any reason that this approval, if there were, like the proposal portion of it, I don't understand why you would need our approval for unless it was somehow a binding grant. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if it came down to the fact that we were going to have to provide something to match, or it was going to be a program that would need funding in the future, couldn't it come to us after the fact? So I'm just saying from a policy perspective, there's nothing to prevent you from applying for any of these things, that you wouldn't need our approval for the proposal portion of it. Right. But in the event that you actually were awarded the grant, I understand that's not necessarily fair to those who then wouldn't have been awarded the grant. But I'm saying, like, isn't that something where if it turns out there was going to need to be a contribution, that we could just deal with that at that time?
Right, the issue is that the one you brought up, it could place the school committee in an awkward position of saying, no, we don't want to accept these funds. I do think there's a way that we can address it, though. I mean, when, for example, the proposals are being developed for NEF, which is probably the main granting source we get in terms of number of grants we get over the course of the year. Those proposals are sent to the principals, and they're sent to me to make sure that they're consistent with the educational goals of the community. And then they come to you for acceptance. We could, I think, probably have some kind of a similar process, only it would be after proposals are submitted for other things, for private grants and for competitive public grants.
I thank you. I think what Dr. Kaufman articulated fits with what I was trying to get to. And maybe instead of what's crossed out, crossing out what's crossed out, but adding something to the effect of, and the committee will be notified of proposals we are pending or part of, or however you want to word it. And then when somebody comes up and says, oh, I see that the schools apply for blah, 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 we at least know it's happening, and we don't look like we have no clue of what's going on. So I think that would feel like a good compromise.
Okay, so remember that for next month.
Sure.
Because it's just the first reading, so.
Well, do you want me to offer a different phrase there for next month, or do you want me to
Yeah, if
say
you
it
want
next
to
month?
bring something, that's fine.
Not now?
Well,
No,
we're not
'cause
voting on it.
It's
now.
on first
Okay.
reading, but,
Okay.
so that would be something you could bring for second.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Ms. Hennessy?
I guess I will comment when Dr. Voss makes the amendment the next time. I'm uncomfortable with it, because I feel like it's a policy making a suggestion for how we want the superintendent to behave, and that's part of his evaluation of how he's communicating with us. So I think that's part of his job description, and to make it in part of a policy statement, to me, oversteps the policy. So I think he's doing it. I feel very well informed, and so I think that's part of the superintendent evaluation, not part of the policy. So when you make a recommendation, we can hash that out, but that's throwing out my 8 cents on that.
Mr. Kaufman?
So are we still pursuing the IDARE/policy of bringing the grant proposals, once awarded, to the school committee for approval? Is that what you mentioned?
I actually don't know where we are on it now. There were many proposals made back and forth. I will say this, the grants that are included in the budget and that are part of the budget moving forward are part of the overall school budget that you receive and are asked to vote on every year. So there's that. I guess this would just be an additional piece of saying new grants that come in after the budget is approved, just to be notified about those as well.
Well, we'll wait for language. I guess I just want to say, the notion that, I think when you write grants and you sign off, or a superintendent signs off on a grant, that they're a part of it, whether it's our grant to a foundation or to a funder, or whether we're signing on as part of the collaborative, I think the expectation is we're going to live up to our financial responsibilities. So I think we'd be walking a really fine line for us to then come back and ask the school committee to vote on that. So I don't know who mentioned that, but my belief is that if we make a commitment to be part of a grant, that we've made that commitment, and coming back and asking for a revote at that point would be problematic. So I would definitely vote against that notion. I think we'd be walking into some real trouble.
Okay. All right, sounds like we'll have a good discussion on this on second reading.
Next, you have policy DFH, fundraising events, and as you can see, it says awaiting further deliberation, so it is in fact awaiting for further deliberation. And then the final policy is policy DH, bonded employees and officers, that we are not recommending any changes to. It's 2 sentences, and they were accurate. Yeah, except the adoption date.
So that'll just be updated. Okay.
Yeah, and so those will all be brought back to you in next month as second readings, and perhaps a new slew of first readings on the rest of section D.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for those 2 reports. Next, we'll have a report from the business manager.
Good evening. In your packet was the fiscal 19 appropriation report that was run as of July 3rd. There's still a lot of transactions that are happening, trying to close out year end. We're trying to do the final payroll, get the encumbrances list over to the city auditor's office. So we're trying to complete all those tasks by this Friday. So then we'll have a good standing of where we finish the end of the year. So those things are still in process at the moment. The gifts, we do have one gift from the PTO, Bridge Street PTO, for $393.27 that we accepted as principals. And also there are 2 warrants that your representative signed for bill warrants during the month of June. There's 2 other things that I'd like to mention. We accepted online payments for the first time during June through our city treasurer's office with UniPay. And we set up in the beginning for a trial. We did bus transportation, so the bus passes are being paid online if people choose to do so. And we also have our athletic fees that are on there as well. In the first week, we had 75 families pay online. So we took in over $19,000 on online payments. And with the way the UniPay system works, it's a 25-cent per transaction fee if they're doing an ACH. If you're using a credit card, it's a little bit different structure, and it tells you right up front what it is that way. So those are some positive things that we're trying to have people have some convenience if they choose to do so, rather than coming in the office or mailing it. They have that availability as well.
Cheaper than a stamp.
Exactly. my thoughts as well. And we have set it up so they can do multiple children on the same 25-cent transaction. The second thing I wanted to mention is our summer meals program is running through our food service program. And Ms. Delhanna, who's our food service director, notified me that last week was the first week. They ran it for 4 days, and they served over 250 meals in the first 4 days. So that program is running successful, and this is her first year doing that, and she started that program up, so that's also running very well.
Some of us enjoyed some of that meals today,
did.
actually.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And to remind people that everybody can go.
Yes.
I think that's a really important piece of
Well,
this.
today was
amazing-
special for adults. Usually
This
it's
was
just
special- That's right,
Correct.
just children, sorry. That's
So
what I meant.
children
Any child.
18 and under.
Hard you next time.
Any child 18 and under. And also, she just wanted to, Ms. Dell wanted me to let you know that they're changing the time just slightly because of the summer program. They were missing the time by a little bit, so if they're going to be running the programs, it's on our website with a revised time. It's from 12 to 1 at the sites rather than 11:30 to 12:30, and those revised sheets are, and the menus are on our district website as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we turn at 7:35 to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. On June 17th, the NPS All Listserv received an email that some mistook for spam. It said simply, "Dear colleague, how did you spend your 180 days?" I had to send out a second message reminding everyone that this was connected to convocation. I don't know why people forgot about convocation. I thought it was a good message. The convocation message, of course, was focused on the idea that time is our most precious resource of all. Because there's no measure of creative budgeting, no new technology, no curriculum that can add a single day to the instructional year. We can waste time, but we cannot manufacture it. And so it is up to us to put each school day to its highest instructional use. I'd intended the email as an invitation to private self-reflection on how our employees had spent the time that they'd been given with our students. I didn't expect that recipients would want to share their reflections with me, but many have. I've enjoyed reading them, and so I'd like to follow suit by sharing my own time study with the public. My first task was to address central office and district staff turnover. Our school business administrator, transportation supervisor, food service director, and school committee clerk all left their positions at about the same time. Filling these key positions and bringing new staff up to speed was essential to maintaining operations. In all these cases, we were able to find experienced, competent, and friendly staff who've not only kept things running, but have come with a number of fresh ideas to help us better serve the public, such as UniPay that you just heard about, and such as summer meals, which you just heard about. The next several months were dedicated to the district review process. I will say it one last time. We submitted 1,148 artifacts to the district review team. And although we've not yet received their report, we did learn a lot about ourselves through the self-study process. We felt that we'd made tremendous progress addressing concerns that had been noted in the last district review, particularly in the areas of financial and asset management, curriculum, student support, technology, and supervision. And we were also able to zero in on assessment practices and professional development as our high priority needs for district improvement, our continuing areas of weakness. Our August professional development will focus on enhancing consistency and quality of our assessment practices as we begin heading down that path. Whether or not we're able to improve professional development will depend on collective bargaining. We still have the same amount of professional development time in our calendar that was deemed insufficient in our 2011 district review. So we'll see what happens with that. Just as the district review was winding down, the FY20 budget development process went into high gear. As has been the case for 2 of the last 3 budget cycles, we received extensive public comment, which required us to make substantial changes between our first view budget and our final version. It wasn't quite as bad as the year when we had to construct 3 complete budget scenarios, but it did require some long and fairly intense additional budget meetings as the alt team struggled to work and rework and partially undo the original budget proposal. While we were working through the budget process, negotiations for a successor contract started. And as you all know, this has consumed a great deal of time and energy from our office. Normally, there's a brief lull between the adoption of the budget and the end-of-year activities, but there was no pause this year. In addition to contract negotiations, late spring brought the news that Sal Canada was leaving Leeds, so we started the search that ultimately brought us to Ms. Wentz. 3 quarters into the way of the Leeds search, Mr. Lombardi announced that he was leaving the high school. I felt as if the year was coming full circle, only instead of filling central office positions, I was now facing a wave of principal vacancies. So the pace of the work has been bustling, and the major expenditures of my time have been in the areas of personnel, budget, and program evaluation. And these are all important aspects of the job. They demanded my attention this year, leaving me little time to focus on anything else, so I think I spent my time about as well as I could have. I did miss spending time in the schools and direct contact with families, and I hope that some of the things that have been taken me away from that work this year, I'll be able to get back to next year as some of the things currently on my plate are able to be resolved. Next year, I think it'll be important for me to focus more time on spending time in schools with our new building administrators. And we'll also be launching 2 additional principal searches in the fall for the high school and for Jackson Street. And so I've begun thinking about how I can develop my professional practice goals next year to give me some intention and some focus to getting back into buildings. So that's how I've spent my 180 days, and I'm giving you a little glimpse into my intentions for the upcoming year. I hope you'll agree that focusing on these priorities for the past goal was worthy, and that the ambition of spending more times in schools and more times with families in the next year is also a worthwhile goal. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Provost. Next, we have a final item on the agenda is a executive session request, and I would ask if the vice chair would make a motion on that. Oh, sure.
Thank you. Make a motion for an executive session request for the executive session under Massachusetts General Law, open meeting, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Northampton Association of School Committees.
School employees.
Thank you, school employees. Whereas an open session would have a detrimental effect and further details would compromise the reason for going into executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I would ask the clerk to call a roll call vote on that, and that requires a yay or nay.
Smalley Burnham?
Yay.
Laura Fallon?
Yes.
Sam Hennessy?
Yes.
Mr. Lonnie Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Howard Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Susan Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Ed Zahowski?
Yes.
Mayor David Narcos?
Yay. Since I said yeas or nays, I had to be consistent. Okay, so the motion carries. The school committee will now move into executive session. I need to advise the public that we will be going into executive sessions because to have this conversation in open session would be detrimental to our bargaining position. I also need to advise the public that we will adjourn from executive session, so we will not actually return to open session. So with that, we will now move into executive session.
District in Florence. Take a quick moment to look at it, and again, focusing on whether there are any conditions we want to attach.
And I know we talked about activities once the National Register District is approved. Did we want to make that a condition of the contract, or just communicate that to the applicant?
Folks?
We're not really funding those sorts of activities, so I don't, it's a little hard to make it a condition, but, so.
I agree with that. But I think we should encourage. I just had one comment on the second whereas. I think just the wording of it, sort of there are 2 pieces to this. So you come with will help preserve the belt and natural landscapes associated with the abolitions, etc. And I think, and then there's an and I think you should have another will in there. This time.
And will increase awareness?
Correct.
Good with that?
I kind of stopped on the will help preserve, and this, I could be talked out of this, but my concern was that people were always worried that putting a historic district somehow limits the property owners, and the help preserve seemed a little stronger maybe than we wanted it to be, because the historic district in itself doesn't in any way mandate the preservation, maybe encourage, or something a little softer.
Is there any state land or publicly owned land in the district, or is it all private?
What about the Sojourner Truth Memorial? And the triangles and the horse spots.
So Linda, you're suggesting a word switch, preserve, for something else?
Yeah.
Encourage preservation of.
Yeah, something like that.
Absolutely down by this.
So Sarah's suggesting help